Recorded in the darkest dungeons of the Basement of Death studio, Josh, Troy, and Ty present a show dedicated to bringing you, the listener, into the adventure right along with them. Pick up your sword or load your bolt gun, but don't forget your helmet, because it is time for some Playin and Slayin. Live from the Basement of Death studios, remote around southeastern Wisconsin, it is Playin and Slayin. Here we are, episode 56, and you may recognize, if you're watching us on YouTube, someone new to Playin and Slayin, but infamous across the Twitch and YouTube verse.
Dangerous, really.
I mean, they say you're both magical, dangerous. I mean, I wrote an introduction here for you. Should I read it? Just for fun. All right. Joining us on the show tonight, the magical Mr Mephisto, the Maestro of ChatGang, the Ranter of RantCasts, the man who sailed 1,000 ships. Andrew, Mr Mephisto.
All of it true. Thank you. Yeah. Sorry to cut you off and throw your mojo off, but I couldn't.
No, it's all good. It is all good. Just happy this worked out. We've been talking about this for what feels like ever. I mean,
I think since the sports award at Brew City Brawl, 2019?
Yeah.
So put it in perspective for everyone. It was about that time we were talking about that. So
then a pandemic happened, and here we are, making it count before the end of 2021.
Oh, there you go.
So I think what we want to do first is, for any of our listeners, I think there's a bit of a crossover. A lot of the folks that listen to us already are familiar with what you do and who you are. But for anyone that's not, let's talk about, what are you famous for on the internet first? What do you do?
Running my goddamn mouth. No, I do AOS content predominantly, but what fascinates me about AOS is really just sort of the passion project that is Warhammer, more than almost any other. I've been around nerd stuff my whole life, and when I ended up into the Age of Sigmar community, this 30-some year nerd who's been a gamer forever, I discovered just this different sort of community, and my brain was just kind of like, well, what makes AOS different? And the only thing I really pinned down was just kind of like the passion of the community itself. So I started doing a show that really focused it more on the adjacencies to Age of Sigmar, and just sort of seeing where that Venn diagram of what makes you an AOS nerd, but what makes you a little bit different maybe than some other nerdery. And so I do that. I do some video game streaming every now and then when my schedule provides, and make really bad YouTube videos, like the worst ones. So.
Well, they're not the worst, certainly, because we have a few YouTube videos. And
yeah, have you recorded one from your truck yet?
No.
High-vis, full rambling, unscripted? No, then you have.
We need to get there.
No, that's the next step for the Basement of Death. It's the RV of death. You got to get everyone into a camper, and you haven't lived until you've made an angry internet video yelling at stuff from your truck.
We really should have. We did a gaming event this weekend. We should have shot some live on scene footage from the back, the patio of the villa.
I'm making a note right now
for next time. So Andrew, we are certainly going to talk about in depth, kind of your hobby gaming origin story. I want to make sure we talk about, the tremendous job you do for mental health awareness with the Rantathon in our main segment. But I think it would be doing a disservice to you and to others if we didn't, go back to our flow, because tonight's episode is your appearance on our show. We're not doing a play it or slay it segment. We're not doing anything else. We're going to include you on the banter and then dive into the main, the main stretch, the big show. But when you're playing and slaying, it's important to stay hydrated. So it is very important that we stay hydrated and talk about what we have in our glasses or cans or mugs. And we're going to start with you, the guest, and you get to tell us and our listeners, what are you drinking tonight?
Well, I'm dual wielding tonight because, it is spooky season, so I've got my mug of vampire blood here. I'm not sure if I'm drinking vampire's blood or if this is supposed to be like the blood for the vampire because of the way they labeled the mug. It's like a $2 mug. I love cheap garbage.
One you gain all their powers,
Right.
The other you gain sustenance.
Right. So we'll see. But that's just water, keeping hydrated. But I've got a nice 10-year port here from Sandman, I guess, or Sandeman. Like, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. It's got a weird floating E in there. Nice 10-year port. When I finish this off, I'll switch over to the Casillero del Diablo, which is just a nice mellow red wine. So I'm going with wine. Sticking with wine this evening.
Were either of those recommendations from the Decant Cast with
both are left over from the Decant Cast. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nice. Excellent. Josh, how about you?
Well, I went with the Big John special. It was a sunny day, so I went with a vodka lemonade because it's a beautiful day.
So I don't know that we've ever talked about Big John, but it's worth mentioning that Big John was a frequent patron of the bowling alley bar that you tended bar at back when we were in our late teens, early 20s.
Yep. Yeah, he would order drinks based on the weather. So if it was a sunny day, it would usually be like a vodka lemonade type. If it was a cloudy day, it was usually like a whiskey and cola or something like that. Rainy, he would mix it up.
Always a theme.
Yeah, there was always a theme.
He had this fantastic voice that now Big John lives on in our D&D campaign because I voice Josh's Warlock's Familiar, who is a tiny pseudo dragon, and I use Big John's voice for that. So,
see, isn't that kind of what's awesome about gaming? This sort of like, especially like I think tabletop RPGs or anything with like a role playing element, which I do consider Warhammer part of. Like we get to like immortalize our friends' memories and like the inside stories and like those inside jokes that evolve with time. Like there's that sort of living, that living performance, that oral tradition of storytelling that Socrates was so very fond of lives on in games, and I find that to be one of the most compelling, the simply the best aspects of it. We've got more than a few like recurring characters, like gamer friends that have died. My friend Craig from muscular dystrophy, he had the chain muscular dystrophy, which is like a death sentence, and they usually don't make it out of their teens. He made it into his 20s gaming with us the whole time, and his famous word is "I'm a punch it," and so like he'd play these like elaborate, awesome characters, but then like whenever things would just drop, like he had this rune blade, this soul drinking rune sword, and he just like decided to punch somebody instead, and like he got his arm lopped off. And like, so anytime someone like kind of sets up this like confounded plan that's like more difficult than just the basic plan, we always like say
punch it.
I'm a punch it, like as
Love
like a
it.
tribute to Craig. Like, so
excellent.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So Big John's vodka lemonade for Joshua tonight. Troy, what about you? What did you find in the reserves?
I have a recurring Genevieve from. I thought a Gen Con beer would be appropriate for tonight, so still working through them. I went through my fridge and I'm like, this is probably my favorite right now, so I'm gonna keep working on it.
Hey, stick with what you know and stick with what you like. I followed that theme. I got so this is new though for me, but I love White Russians. They're one of my like favorite. Just every so often mix one up. So I saw this on the shelf on the specialty beer rack at Total Wine. Left Hand Brewing's White Russian Nitro. It's a white stout with coffee and vanilla added, and they describe it as this like smooth and decadent beer. It comes in around 9% alcohol by volume. It's just this super smooth, and you get definitely a little bit of that, cream and coffee taste. It's just really, really delicious. I might drink 4 of them tonight. We'll see.
Left Hand's Nitro Stout is real talk one of my favorite beers. like on the market. If that's even remotely close to that, it sounds like you're in Flavor Town.
It is. And it's the Nitro Abides they have on it. So it's the total,
That's
Lebowski
4.
reference. Yeah.
There's been 4 tonight, and I have held my tongue on everyone because we're in like the bowling alley, like
Yeah.
one of the best lines of all time.
We might have to just call this the Lebowski episode. Like,
well, no, I mean the appropriate response is "fuck it, dude. Let's just go bowling."
Let's go
right?
bowling.
Like, yeah,
we used to say that in high school all the time and actually go bowling.
And come see me while I was working.
Come see Josh. Yeah.
amazing.
All right. So bowling is a game, and we talk about playing games here. So let's dive right in to playing games. I'm going to do this all night, Josh.
I'm
here to train you. I'm just going to segue us right from one to the next. But there's been a lot of board games going on. I didn't even update this after this weekend of Gamehole Con, but can definitely cover a few of those. But let's start with Troy. Troy, what have you been playing? Some of these have been, I'm assuming with the brothers Weiss on online, but some in person. But I'll let you kick it off. What's been getting to the table? Anything that stands out? We don't have to go deep dive into all of them. But
so one that I realized I missed from our Gen Con weekend is Ben and I did finally play Chronicles of Crime, which is the it's the app aided board game. So you have an app on your phone that walks you through the stories, and there's a bunch of different stories in the starter box. I think there's 3 main ones, and about 9 different crimes that you can go through. What's interesting is all the components in the box basically I'll say they're generic. So you have a bunch of people, places, and things basically in the box, all cards, and then you put them out, and then the app basically figures out which of those people, places, and things apply to this scenario and tells you to put them out, and they can change, basically, because all they are is they all have QR codes on them, and so you scan them, and then
you scan the card, and it generates the scene.
Yep, generates the scene, and so the man whose face is there in one story can be, could be the butler, and the next one he's the servant, or in the other one he's a cop, or it could be a witness. So it's interesting how they just, they gave you a set of tools, and then they just build the stories around them. And then I think there's some expansions for it. And what's cool is, like, when you are at the scenes, then you can actually pull up the app, and then it's like VR mode. You actually hold it up and you can look around 3D and kind of search the whole room and find clues. And basically, so you'll see something like you're in this room and you're like, ooh, it looks like she was drinking tea. And then you'll find a card that says, some more generic. So it might be like food or drink or something. You'll scan that card and it would say, oh yeah, you found a clue. And then and then the app would give you more information. Then you have to piece it together. So it was fun. And it was definitely, it felt like a puzzle, right? You're like, all right, this person's connected. It's going to tell us to go to this scene, and who should we talk to? And then I guess a little twist is you do have like some expert people too. So you have like forensics experts and like a psychologist and others. So you can take clues and go, it's like, oh, we're going to take that to the forensic specialist, and maybe she'll find something else to give us another clue that'll move us along in the story. So I think it was fun. I think it's fun. It's an interesting idea. And we only played a couple of them when we were there in one night, but it was something that was sitting on my shelf forever, and I finally had a reason to get it out. And it was you
mean that mammoth shelf behind you of like 160 games? You had to finally start moving through the collection and like cross them off.
Yeah, the ones I try not to keep them in shrink wrap if I don't play them, so it doesn't look bad. But I think now I've called it pretty good. Most of them I've at least like gotten to the table at least once, but there is still a couple here that we need to get to. So, and so the next one, I think, and some we don't get to are our 2-player games, but Ty, you and I recently have been actually making our way through our 2-player backlog. And so maybe I'll let you talk about Undaunted. That was one you brought over.
Yeah, I feel like I talked about Undaunted, like the Gen Con I purchased it at, but it's a really cool kind of, obviously 2-player, you can't play it with more, deck building tactical war game. So you're trying to move around tiles that are laid out, and then the deck building draw mechanic is kind of what powers your action. So if you draw the unit card, you can make them move or shoot or whatever. Uses a 10-sided dice and adds distance to your target, and then different tiles have cover value. So you're kind of playing this tactical war game with tokens, being powered by a deck builder. And Troy worked me over. His strategy was flawless, and he beat me twice out of 3 games. So
No, but
I need to get good at Undaunted to take back the throne.
no, you won the third scenario, which was but that one ended up being a nail biter. That ended up really being the third scenario, which was a little more involved. But I just think it's really interesting to have, like you described, a bunch of kind of different genres kind of all mixed in there, with where you have that deck builder as your engine. But there's definitely some strategy around, how are you going to attack and how are you going to move your people around. So
Yeah.
that was fun.
How about Andrew? Have you been any board gaming or RPG playing? Any non AOS gaming getting done?
If you don't mind me going into the virtual realm for a minute, it's
Yeah.
like I said, spooky season, and I like all like horror stuff. I like horror fiction, horror movies, horror games. So this was my 5th annual #Mephtober celebration. We got to have bad Crypt Keeper puns, right? Like, and so I played some like video games. I tend to focus on indie games a lot. Like last year I did like Dark. I think I did Little Nightmares. So I do some like indie games. And this year, there was this game that like came out last year. It was called Devotion, kind of the follow up to Detention, which was this sort of like indie side scroller puzzle horror game by, what was it, Red Candle, I think they're called. Red Candle Games, like a Taiwanese company. Great, like, so, you could feel the indie of that initial game, but like huge success. I was just looking forward to this new follow-up game with a little bit more buzz, a little bit more production, called Devotion, and it got pulled off of Steam and GOG and all these like gaming platforms. And no one knew why it just disappeared. Suddenly, like, the buzz around it is it's banned. It's, too scary to play. Like how when something just disappears, everyone just makes up their own narrative. Well, it was basically, it takes place in 1980s Taiwan, and there is some criticism just in the backdrop of the Chinese government. So China pressured all the distributing companies to essentially not distribute it. So it wasn't technically banned. You're just going to buy it anywhere. It was an indie game, so it only really released on digital platforms, and none of the digital platforms would push it. So just this game just disappeared for an entire year. And finally, Red Candle Games was able to like put together their own platform and their own site to like sell it to you. So this is just like this game that for like an entire year I sat there wanting to play. And I mean, it's hard to like hype horror games, but it's pretty straightforward, like just sort of like a walking simulator with some genuinely great atmosphere and surprisingly light on the jump scares. And you're just sort of like puzzling together, like, why is this guy looping through his own apartment, like through like 1986 and 1983, and like just this sort of like weird timeline. And you sort of see the calendar on the door as you enter it, and then you're in your same house again, but all the set pieces are rearranged around. And I'm not going to give it away, but it was just this sort of game I finished playing, and I'm just like, huh. I just like had to sit there and just digest it. I spent the rest. I finished playing the game. I think it was the most recent game I played, so it's the freshest in my mind. I finished playing the game at, I think, like midnight. I was up till 4 a.m. just like thinking about it, Googling some stuff to like see if that lined up with my memory of history, and like just the sort of game that like haunted me after I'd finished playing it. So just absolutely excellent game, and sort of almost like opposed to that, but in the same spectrum of like makes you think, thought-provoking stuff. I had played a game called Stories Untold, which the pitch of is great, but they pull a little bit of a rope-a-dope on you with their formula as the game progresses. It is an anthology, text-based like RPG essentially. And so like it's a horror game, and your shot when you first start playing the game is of like, I don't know if you remember the old sort of like the primitive games that were played on like essentially a cassette tape, and you'd have like the cassette and you put it in your keyboard, and like that's how you'd run through it. So like the set piece, like your screen when you load in, is like picking up the game cartridge, putting it in, and then like playing on this old like red, I think it's like a red and black monitor, or like an old 3-color monitor. And you're like, like, oh, you pull up in a car, like, what do you do? And you're like, you remember your dad put a glove, like a note in the glove box, open glove box, and just this like great little text-based game, but as you're like playing it, the screen glitches a little bit, and your character's sitting at a desk, and the desk scenery changes a little bit. Like really, like around the time like there's so many super meta moments that you're doing the tech stuff, and like you find yourself like somebody's in the room playing a video game, like is what the game screen references, and you're like, I'm the guy in the room playing the video game, but also I'm the guy in my room playing the video game that is. Yeah, it's so like great, but as it progresses, it's an anthology, and it goes through what sort of like 3 separate stories that are all tied together in the end, and it is just like when it was made in like 2017 as a game that pretends to be 1983, and it's
weird. Just a classic like throwback. Everything's kind of that nostalgia feel.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of like how Stranger Things just puts together the right blend of nostalgia and atmosphere. It was like that, but for horror and for video game nerds. Like if you remember Zork, and you're just like, hell yeah, like it was really cool. And they mess with their own formula. So at some point, like there was like a small walking simulator, and honestly, it was probably one of the best parts of the game. But so I don't want to like missell anyone to be like, he said this was a text-based game, and then like someone gets halfway through and they're like, I'm not text-basing anymore, and they like flip their desk and they at me on Twitter at @MR_MEPH. Boom, got them.
Yes.
So yeah, played those 2. Those were excellent. A little bit ago, tail end of summer, Travis Winter from AOS Warhammer Gamer.
Saw Travis this weekend.
Yeah,
Give him big hugs. Stopped by a few times to visit.
Yeah. He came down and we hung out. We played some actual board games. I played Dice Miner with him finally.
Cool.
I think everyone at the table won one round of that effectively. Molly schooled everybody in Exploding Kittens. Like, and so
is that her game? Is she like
it's her game?
All right.
It's just it's Russian roulette. So it's just a game of chance for the most part, but with some caveats. And like I'm a good gamer, as much as one can be, who plays tons of games his whole life and has devoted some effort into trying at them at all, right? And I know about card advantage and MTG and all these like mechanical like high concept things in games, and like board control, even if the board is just sort of metaphoric. Who's the beatdown, who's in control, and she destroys me 3 out of 4 times, and anybody else, and it's just like it's just like she's cheating. Like, because it's funny, because if you buy stuffies from them, they give you extra cards that say, hey, cheat at the game. It's like if you buy any of their merch, which is great, it's just like, here, you start your hand with this in play or whatever, or you start the game with this in hand, which I think is great, by the way. Excellent marketing. Market, cheat to win.
Absolutely.
Good on y'all. But like the joke is that like, oh yeah, she's just got her Molly diffuse, or she's got her Molly like card just at all times. Like, always assume she's got a Molly card. Like, she's just gonna. So, and like, I'll tell people, I'm like, target Molly, she'll beat you. And it's almost like sometimes people targeting her is exactly why she wins in the end. And it's like, I don't know how to beat her. I don't know.
It fuels her.
Yeah.
That's great. Josh, how about you, man? Playing anything?
Yeah, I mean, with it being Meth's favorite time of the year, we were trying to find a themey type game, and over the weekend, and the kiddos picked zombie dice, so we played
Nice.
far too much zombie dice, and we have the 4-year-old, so we had to play something kind of low key, right? Nothing too crazy.
Yeah, you couldn't bring out Black Plague and
right.
have the 4-year-old playing zombie side. Yeah.
Yeah. So she I mean, and she could kind of follow along and figure it out, and that was fun. So yeah, I think they enjoyed it. So good times.
Nice. I just want to. I'm not going to mention everything I played at Gamehole. Maybe I'll make a list to include in the show notes for Troy. I always promise him I'll help, and I never do. Like what I played, but I picked up a new game, the Kickstarter edition. So I was going to buy it from I'm Bored, the vendor hall at Gamehole Con. I didn't buy it Thursday. They didn't have it Friday, so we hit up Brian Cowell, BK, former professional Magic player, now owner of Misty Mountain Games in Madison, and he was going to be hanging out with us for the weekend. We said, hey, do you guys got any of the game at Misty Mountain? He's like, yeah. So we went in there. We left the game convention to go to the east side of Madison to go to Misty Mountain, and we bought like think I bought $200 worth of games. John bought like another $250, and Matt bought a few games. So like we walked out of there with like $500 of board games when we were in town for a game convention, but we went to a local game shop. So if you're ever in Madison, go to Misty Mountain Games because it's the greatest local gaming store in Madison. Some are huge, some are great, but Misty Mountain just has that classic feel of like,
It's like the Sanctuary, right?
yeah, you like, you come in, people are playing Magic in the back, and it's got the cool curated board game shelves, and like he carries a lot of like miniature game sets. It's just a really cool kind of all around local gaming store. So I picked up Oath, and Oath is by Later Games, the guys and gals who did Root, but Oath is a asymmetrical board game that is built to ruin my brain because there's so many different ways to go with it. Like the concept is you're in this kind of feudal, kind of middle-aged society. And there's these locations that your warlord travels to, and you have these war bands you control. But one player is the chancellor, who is like the overlord of the land. And the other players play exiles that either can be named as citizens of his place and then support him and have their own unique win condition where the chancellor has to be in power and do such and such. Or you're in exile and you have to usurp and become the usurper to take the power from the chancellor, and then you have your own win conditions. So it's this weird kind of power dynamic working out at the table as you move guys around and try to generate income and secrets. And there's all these, it's just a super deep game. But what's really cool about Oath is you write a chronicle as you go. So you record the game state and certain things that happen and then add things into it. So it kind of plays out in this legacy style. But my mind was blown trying to learn it. And then now I just want to play it, but I'm worried I don't have a group to play it with. So I might force like Josh and Troy to play Oath with me. Because I need to figure out this game. It's absolutely incredible. And I got a Kickstarter edition. So I have like the campaign coins, like the metal coins, and like the neoprene rollout mat board.
You sold me already. I'm already Googling it. Like,
dude, it's so fun. It's such a fun, like, it's absolutely insane how deep the game is.
Well, I love the art too. Really,
yeah,
sort of stylistic, vibrant, like.
Yeah, really colorful. The card art is all the cards are like unique, and
I mean, call me a mark, but I like the aesthetics of a board game too. Like I know there's something to be said for like minimalism in a board game, like with like proper meeples and stuff like that. But something just pulls you in and gets you in the mindset.
Yeah, it's a beautiful game, and it's incredibly like complex, and I want to figure it out, and I want to live in that game for a while. But we'll see if I can get it regular. There is a solo version where you play against the Clockwork Prince. So it takes the role of you flip the Chancellor board to this Clockwork Prince, and you're trying to defeat his like automaton government and be an exile that can take over. So maybe if I get really desperate this winter, I'll play a bunch of solo games of Oath. Any other games you guys want to mention or call out? I know we've played a ton of other stuff, but I think that was a good kind of
I think
summation.
The only one I'll close with is we did play The Crew, and at first I heard about it, and I think it won some the German gaming convention kind of thing.
It was up for Spiel, right?
Yeah,
or was it
one of the and so it did pretty good. And then so John and Ben and I tried it, and I get it. I understand why it's kind of cool. At its core, it's just a simple trick-taking game. You have 5 suits and then a trump suit, and it's and literally the highest number in that suit wins, takes the trick. Then the thing is there's a book about 50 different, I'll call it adventures they call it. There's a really light theme on this, right? As the crew is like you're a space station crew, and so you go work your way through the book, and the first ones are pretty simple, and you have the deck of cards, and then there's a small deck, like a tiny deck of cards too, like that just have it. And what happens is they'll tell you need to do certain tasks and number of tasks or something like that. And so what happens is you flip out these smaller cards, and these represent basically that the tasks are basically whoever takes that smaller card and has that task, basically they have to win the trick with that number card in it. And it's a co-op game, so you all kind of see it, but you can't. But then the twist is you can't communicate, right? You can't tell other people at the table what you have in your hand, and so but there is a mechanic where you can show limited information, so you can like once per round, they'll say, or game, you can kind of show like, hey, here's either the highest number I have of a suit, the lowest number I have of a suit, or this is the only card I have of a suit. And so you can kind of, pick and choose when is that information going to be appropriate. So it was interesting with the very simple mechanics. And then when they kind of throw that twist in and you're like, oh, and now it's more of a puzzle that you're solving together to try and figure out, all right, how are we going to solve this to make sure that John gets the blue 8 and Ben gets the green 9. And then they don't want to spoil it, because one of the things that's the fun part, and we haven't even gone through it, is that as you go through the different challenges are pretty interesting. I'll just I think it was even the third or fourth one, we'd kind of just got down to like, all right, we kind of figured out like how to figure out who gets the right number cards and things like that. But then all of a sudden the other one was little stories like, somebody is sick. Pick one person after the deal is out. One person has to pick, and that person cannot win any tricks. And
after the deal.
After the deal. So you can, and you can't communicate. So you can't say, and it's basically it chooses one person to say the captain. Like, you have to choose of the other people at the table who's the person that's not gonna.
Oh man.
And so you have to kind of look at your hand, and right, and I think they can give information to say how they're feeling. They can say, I feel good or I don't feel good. So they can kind of like give you a little tip, like, okay, if one person thinks, okay, yeah, I think I could maybe figure out how to not win on that. So that was, again, really a lot of fun. I think it took us 2 or 3 tries to solve that one. So I just got to say, I can see how that's a lot of fun and why it won an awards, and definitely would be fun with the right group. Again, I think it plays 4 max. I don't think it plays a whole lot of people, but a nice little game. And again, tiny game. I don't know what it even costs, $20-$25 maybe at the most. So I can definitely understand.
That's a large pizza.
Large pizza, right? And you're gonna get more than your fun pizza out of it. Like I said, I think there's 50 different, and there's another. I think they already released another version, like Atlantis, the crew Atlantis or something like this, which is, I think, instead of a spaceship crew, you're like a crew living under the water. So very light narrative, but it is kind of fun how they weave that stuff in there. So
you remind me. So the cost, we equate it to a large pizza. I wish I could remember who it was on Twitter. A DM did a breakdown of the cost of like a role-playing game book, like the 5e modules that play a campaign, and they're like $40-$50, and they did a breakdown though of how many sessions of that book they played, how many hours they played, and how many players they had, and it came down to like per person it was 3 cents per hour was the cost of that book. So it's like, when you're talking about equation of like fun to be had for cost, I can't think of anything that you could pay 3 cents for an hour of, like, and have a good time and have fun. And it's kind of changes my mentality to like the cost of games, especially RPG books and other stuff. I'm gonna have to try to find it and share that, because I went down the thread and I'm like, it blew my mind when I actually thought about the math of, you're playing a 6-person game. The books cost you $150. You play, 4 hours a week. You do that for 3 years. It's insane when you think about the actual like cost for the fun that gaming in general offers. I mean, army aside, if you're buying an army for like AOS, slightly different price point, but still the number of games you play and the time and the hours,
I mean, when I was still in games journalism, before I left for reasons, one of the things I was like hyper aware of, especially when I would write some like video game review articles, was like $60 retail. Mm-hmm. Like, how many hours of gameplay do I get out of $60 retail? Which is just the number that sits in your mind as like, if I'm paying $60 for a 10-hour experience, like, like, even if the game was the most polished thing ever, I still feel ripped off. So that's part of what made me gravitate towards indie video games for a while there, because like, I'd pay $15 for like a 4-hour experience, like if it makes me think or feel something. And it all came kind of full circle when a box of Mortek Guard for Ossiarch Bone Reapers is $60 for 20 of them. It was just like, was just like, huh. I like video games don't feel like the most efficient use of time. Kind of what you're saying there is when you buy an army in AOS, you're not just paying to have the physical thing. You are paying for that hobby aspect too. The time you put into it should
the model kit.
theoretically be rewarding too, to paint and to hobby and to put together. And then once you have the army, a couple tweaks here and there to keep it like current with the GHB or the competitive scene if you're doing the competitive thing. But like, I mean, okay, so now I don't play my Mortec crawlers anymore, so I guess I'm down 400 points. But I put in some more murder ponies, and like, and they have the range, or you're already like, by that time people are rotating through and selling stuff sold. Even AOS is kind of a steal relative to like the amount of time that you do get out of its considerably higher price point than like a tabletop RPG. So.
No,
I mean, heck,
no,
in tabletop RPGs, you just have to know the guy with the books.
Have a forever GM in your friend circle, and you're set.
Right,
it's free entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
I think the hobby element, though, I want to kind of spin off of that because we have a segment where we talk about what we've been hobbying. So I'm going to do what Josh loves, is where I transition to the next part of the show. So we're going to talk a little bit about hobbying. I will be the first to shamefully admit I've entered crisis mode of hobby, and I might as well share it here versus anywhere else. But Bryce and I made the joint decision to withdraw from Havoc, which was kind of a painful decision, but both of us have had very limited. I know Bryce isn't able to record tonight, but very limited time and like dedicated hobby just motivation. And we shared an email with Steve and told him, when we think of Havoc, that's where we want to bring our best like hobby work, and neither of us are doing anywhere close to our best because we're just struggling. We've kind of hit this this
like
point where this total wall, nothing productive is happening, and we don't want to rush. We didn't want to bring something we'd already done because we think of Steve's event as kind of like our that's like maybe? That's our show. Like that's the big show for us, is the reveal of the secret project and all this. And maybe we outkicked our coverage a little bit. Maybe we kind of overhyped ourselves and burned out a little. But so we withdrew, and not a lot of hobby's been going on. I've been doing more, more gaming related stuff and kicking around some campaign ideas and that, but nothing really with miniatures or painting. Just like dabbling. Like I'll pick up a kit and I'll put like an arm on something, or I'll like clip stuff off a sprue, and I'm trying to like just get myself back into any kind of like hands-on paint. And then today I filled out this is hobby. This counts as hobby. It's kind of Kickstarter, but it's already Kickstarted, so it's hobby. Redgrass, the wet palette, version 2, got the reminder to fill out the survey, and I was like, oh, sweet. Yeah, I'm going to get my fancy new. Yeah, I love those. And I back the new one they're doing that has like the, more magnetic attachments and just it's a bigger size. And I'm like, yes. So I don't know when I'll get that, but when I do, I'll be ready for it. And then I also
thank you, because I got that reminder email as well, and I put it to the side. I need to get back to it, so thank you for the reminder. And
then I queued up my shelf full of Crisis Protocol, so I put all of my to be built Crisis Protocol models like one in a row, so it's like a book, facing out to me, so I can just take one off. They're right here. I mean, I've got Thor and Valkyrie ready to go. Ant-Man and the Wasp.
I will not be tempted. I cannot be tempted.
It's a great game.
Do they have like the whole Wolverine like clan yet? Where you can be like Wolverine X.
Yeah, they've added.
Are they all in?
No. So right now it's just like classic Wolverine, but they added like Gambit and some of the other X-Men now are in.
I'm good.
I
can resist.
Yeah, I got Kingpin.
I don't need another mini game. I can barely keep up with.
I have multiple Spider-Mans.
I need a 3D print a building for him and just send it to him. Be like, hey,
just send him some Crisis Protocol terrain.
I hear their terrain is amazing too. Like how they deal with terrain in the game is like excellent. It's skirmish, like
it's so. You know what I'm gonna do, Andrew? Bryce and I did this to Josh when he was kind of on the fence. We just bought a core set and shipped it to him. So it's likely you're just gonna get one that shows up at your house, and then you're gonna be forced into it.
I don't know if you how much twittering you do, but like there's this dude Helgi Mar, and he every time like he's in like Iceland, I believe it is. I flip Iceland and Greenland constantly, so I apologize. I think it's Iceland though.
Yeah, I
And
think
every
he's
now and then, yeah, and every now and then I'll just see him like have a new Hall of Crisis Protocol, and he like will DM me because he knows the exact type of comic nerd I am. Like he knows my stuff, and he's just like hey, got this. I'm like, no, you won't. You can't tempt me.
we will. It's
Like
you.
Wolverine wasn't in the game, and it was so easy when Wolverine. I think Magneto
No, he
wasn't
is,
even
though.
in it
Yeah.
yet, and I'm
Yeah,
like,
Magneto's in now. Yeah, he's there.
oh,
Man,
my
I'm
favorites.
gonna get you in. Tony Moore, so the Count, just a tremendous AOS player. He's been all in on Crisis Protocol of late. He's doing the first Crisis Protocol 2-day event over there. I think at Element Games, they're doing a 2-dayer, and I was like, that is awesome to see. So that is actually where assembling some of these Crisis Protocol models is probably going to be what gets me back to doing any kind of hobby, because I went through my collection and keyed it up, but. I think there's an ebb and flow to gaming, and AOS 3. It hasn't grabbed me yet. I think there are cool things about it, but like is it a waxing? No, it's a waning moon, right? When the moon is like fading on something and then waxing when it's growing. Is that how that works?
Yeah, waning is it's receding, and waxing is cresting, or it's coming.
My AOS moon is waning, and my Crisis Protocol moon is waxing. But I'll kick it over. Andrew, have you been doing any hobby? I know sometimes you go in a lull, but sometimes you paint. I know you did to do an on stream painting, right? Didn't you have
Yeah, I do paint on stream some. In an ideal world where I have infinite motivation and infinite time, but I also can spend an adequate amount of time with my family, I would have like a schedule every week, and I would do one hobby stream on like Wednesdays or something like that, and I do, RantCast and blah blah. I pretty much only keep on top of RantCast, but I started painting some Vargeists,
nice.
just to get my brush warmed up again, basically, because I know I'm tired of this narrative, but it's applicable, and I haven't told it on your show yet, so I'm going to tell it. But I totally checked out for 2020. I swore off tournaments through this year even. And not really swore off, but I'm like, I got to this year and I was looking around and I'm like, I still don't feel comfortable going back to tournaments either. And so I'm like, I'm not going to tournaments either for this year. And what you're saying with like Holy Havoc is like, that was the one where I'm like, that might pull me back. Like that might pull me back.
Same here. That's what I thought. That was going to be my return. After NashCon, I wasn't comfortable. I'm like, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, I didn't have the time for NashCon in any sense. And I'm like, okay. So, and without that, that carrot, self-motivating is something I'm capable of doing, but I've got to see the returns on some form, whether it's just someone like high-fiving me and saying, hey, great job on that model. But I need that. I crave validation. I need it. I need the likes and subscribes. Like and subscribe right now to Playin and Slayin. And then I will catch the residual, it'll feel like he'll be like, yo, we got more likes and subscribes during your episode of Playin and Slayin, and then I'll just smack talk previous guests or whatever I need to do and be like, yeah. So I need that validation. Click like and subscribe. Engage with the algorithm by leaving a comment, even if it's like, yo, Meph is crazy. Do that right now. I do need that that validation a little bit, and without seeing all my friends and without it's just not even being able to show off the hobby. I just completely. But then I went to help to just say hi at Brew City Brawl, and I was like, look, and I saw my friends having a fun again, and I was like,
yeah,
and I'm like, okay, I think it's coming back. I think I'm getting the fire back in my belly, but that wasn't it. That wasn't quite enough. That was enough to get me looking around, to get me in the door, but it wasn't enough to get me to sit down.
It did create a spark, though, in your son. Rumor has it there's a future Seraphon player that was created.
Yeah.
Came out of the Christian Ware Seraphon factory and was like, I'm in.
He, it's funny because my son is very, and this is the part where we lose a bunch of engagement because someone talking about their kids. But
that's what we are. We're a family show.
Yeah,
this is like a dad cast.
Yeah. No. My son, he's he's a daddy's boy, for lack of better vernacular. Like, I'm obviously his favorite parent. Like, he totally wants, like, if I'm into it, he's into it. And so, like, he knows I play Death, and I'm like, he knows Nagash, and like, he's like, oh, what makes Nagash so cool, Dad? And then I give him my like propaganda, like sanitized for a kid version of why Nagash is the sweetest ever. And so he's like, yeah, cool. But then he's like staring there at like freaking Christian Ware's Seraphon, like the dinosaurs. And like, we've walked past 2 OBR armies at this point. Like, I think there's like some Fletcher. We saw Tanya's like Fletcher courts, and like, he sees those freaking dinosaurs, dude. And I'm just like, I've lost him. And then Christian Ware, like, totally, like, the first hit is free. He gave Colin the display board because he was going to take it back to Australia with him, and left 2 Bastillodons for him with Brendan. And I'm just like,
so awesome.
And I'm like, and I don't know, there's off air if it'll be in the cold open or whatever, but I was kind of saying off air, like, there's something about this AOS community that I don't know if it's trauma bonding or something like that, like whatever it is, but there's something about this community that's just special. I've been around gaming my whole life, and I've never, as a parent, you're all parents, right? Like, everyone here is a parent. Do you get that like insecurity when you have your kids in a public space, like where you're just like I hope my kids behave, I hope nobody's judging me, like if I have to, like, heaven forbid, like discipline them in public, be like, hey, don't do that, like, or something like that, like they're gonna think I'm a monster, and you have that, like, that whole time, like I take Colin there because I wanted him to see AOS in person, because that's the best way to experience AOS, is to just go to a game store, go to a tournament, just walk around a little bit, and but there's that part of me like, oh god, what if he like knocks over a model, like what if this happens?
Yeah.
And I had that like this just like anxiety, but then like after like a few minutes of just like just people like talking to my son, and not just me, and not just like, oh, what are you doing, like in that way where you infantilize a kid and you're like, he's not an idiot, like he's inexperienced, but children are like super intelligent. People just talking to him like I'd imagine one point in time when you were a kid in the game store just staring at the armies, like picking up your favorite blister pack, or like just that marvel you'd get, like you spend it.
Yeah.
I would spend hours reading the new RPG book I couldn't buy, like I was just reading it, and nobody really, like the store owners wouldn't like harsh on me. There's probably some older kids that are like, what the heck, but like there was that vibe, and AOS was like that to 11, and it was just really cool, and I both love and despise Christian Ware for like indoctrinating my son into Seraphon. But,
well, what kid doesn't want to play with dinosaurs? Like,
I know! I can't even fault him. I can't be mad.
There are adults, like, so Paul DK loves dinosaurs, and when he saw dinosaurs, he's like, I think slowly but surely over the last few years, he's been like putting together some dinosaurs. Speaking of dinosaurs, Troy, what have you been hobbying? That was for you, Josh.
Nothing. I think Josh and I also had a come to reality moment to back out of Havoc. And I know we were both very torn because we have not experienced it, and I did have that pull, like, oh, this would be so, like, I was excited, but as we were trying to put our plan together and just trying to lay things out, it just didn't, it didn't look good for any kind of mental health to do some kind of a marathon. And then unfortunately I was validated like the very next, I don't know, day or whatever after. I just had a like horrific day at work and realized like there would have been no way I would have had the even if I could have had the plan. I did kind of have the, like, all right, here's what I'd have to do every day to make sure we get it. But it didn't have a lot of slack in it and things like that. So it kind of validated, and it actually trying to reduce stress. And I didn't want, something fun shouldn't, I think that's what I mentioned out with Josh, is like something fun shouldn't, cause stress for you. It should be something you're enjoying along, as part of the process. There can be some, anxiety and actually more excitement than anxiety, and that causes stress.
Right.
So, so that made sense. And so my hobby is procurement, as I think, Andrew, as you were saying, like you spend your $60 and then you put time in it. Usually, like, I'll buy the box and then it sits on my shelf, and so I'm not sure I haven't quite figured out that part where you actually then get your money's worth out of it. Or I look. You have a
great shelf though, like. Calling
I
it a
don't-
shelf is a disservice, Troy.
Yeah, it's a museum.
Yeah.
It is a monument to gaming. It is truly something to behold.
So
Like-
one of our dear friends, listeners, Josh in Arizona, Andrew, you'll appreciate this, requested that we do a BOD Cribs episode where like we show our gaming space and our hobby backlog and like our basement, and I think we're gonna have to do that. Because you get a little piece of it now, but you don't get the full scope of like the disaster that's my basement, and the like game store feel of Troy's. The BOD proper is like the best battle bunker that ever existed. But we may have to do a BOD Cribs walkthrough, get a GoPro and just do the tour.
Yep. And so we have it. So I do want to loop back on, you did this weekend at Gamehole. I did tell Ty that I stepped in and I found Cable and Domino for Marvel Crisis. And that got me. I'm like, oh, and it was on sale too. And I'm like,
that Cable model's so cool with he's throwing up like the shield.
Because that made me.
I'm telling you, Andrew, you're gonna get. I'm gonna find a way to make it happen.
Oh man, I don't know. I can't like I've got Blood Bowl 2 that I'm a little back on. Like I'm backed up on, and I just got my necromantic pitch. Because death for life. Paradoxically. But I'm like that's my skirmish game, right? Blood Bowl's my skirmish game, and then someone's
Blood Bowl's
like,
a lot of models.
But
that's a lot of models.
But Blood Bowl, well, the counter, I heard like, no, Blood Bowl's more of a board game than a skirmish game. So you could do one more model.
Yeah, you could.
That's true.
You could.
And then there's that part of me that like Vince released his like little like minis agnostic game, and I'm like,
Rain in Hell,
like,
yeah,
Rain in Hell. So I'm like, so I could have Wolverine and like, my Clown Gash, on the same team. In Vince's game, like
you could
just like I don't know, man. It's tempting there. Like that's the thing is like my fire for minis is linked to like that. I think that social aspect, that validation, like I said, and when the social wanes, it's hard to like keep pumped. But that lady, or not lady, the vampire lord Anatsa Malkovian. The NB overlord of all things. I've already messaged Mini Stomp. Like I've already handed him money just preemptively. I'm just like, get me one.
Such a cool looking model, and they revealed that.
Maybe we'll see if it's procurement or if when that arrives, that's the one. Because I finally started making lists again, and I'm a cerebral player, and I like the list building. List building for me is almost a hobby in and of
You
itself.
generated a thread of it on Twitter. I saw everyone's like pitching vampire lists to you. I was like, this is great.
Yeah, I'm like, how many vampires can I physically fit in a list and
50.
still be a responsible adult?
One of the lists is like 50 Blood Knights. It's something obscene, or like is a ridiculous amount of Blood Knights.
The best ones from the Mad Lad himself, W. Soren, who's in like all of the communities and like just a fantastic hobbyist, donated for the Rantathon. I'm sure we'll talk about that maybe a little bit later.
Yeah.
And he made a list that was exactly 2,000 points or maybe 1995. And it was 42 vampires. The answer to the universe, and everything. It's 42. The answer to every. I'm like. I'm like, that's got to be the one. Like, I gotta make that. And now that I gotta make that list and have an intent to play that list, now I need to show off the hobby that goes with that list. I already have my display board plans. I just need to find some with like a big resin printer that can print the like bigger scale resin stuff, because it's like a high detail centerpiece thing. But yeah, so it's there. I kind of want to. I don't know. Coop's got to talk about his hobby yet, but I wanted to maybe have a little bit of positivity for anyone out there like struggling with their hobby, is like lean on your friends. Yeah. I mean, your homies are what gonna help are what gonna help you.
I've come close to suggesting a hobby night with these guys, like just to get together and clip some sprues and put something together, or like
do it in Discord.
Yeah,
we've had some Discord hobby hangouts with people like across the country, and they've really helped people get like just paint on the brush again. And I think that's half the battle is like, man, I gotta refill my wet palette and I gotta lay out my brushes and I gotta figure out what paint I'm using. And like you have that like whole thing.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's like honestly, if you just dip the brush in the paint, you'd be surprised how often just setting out with like, okay, I'm not even gonna paint any model, I'm not even gonna think about a model. I'm just gonna set up like I'm going to paint today. And you'd be surprised how many times that transitions into painting just because you're like, okay, all right, the hard part is physically getting my station ready. So today the goal is to just get my station ready. And that sets you up. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's my problem, right? I
So
have
Josh,
a giant mess behind.
let's talk about your hobby. It looks like you've been doing some work back there.
No, that it looks like I may have done some work. It is just a hot mess. That's all it is.
All right. Well,
That's
next.
the problem. I mean, exactly what Andrew was saying. Like, if you have a space and you have, it's ready to go, I'd probably be painting, but I need to clean it up, and that's my
Your homework assignment, Coop, is by next Tuesday, clean a square foot of hobby space, and then Tuesday night at 8:00, we're gonna hop on Discord, and instead of recording a podcast next Tuesday, we're gonna hobby. So,
Wait, let's do
hobby banter, 8 p.m. Tuesday.
You could do you have the ability to do Twitch live? You could Twitch live stream that too. But I don't want to like suggest like
we do have a Twitch channel.
Yeah, I don't want to suggest commoditizing all that stuff because if the goal is to just paint and hobby, you don't want to link that into the pressures of also streaming and also yada yada yada.
I don't know. Maybe I'll like streaming hobby.
But if it's going to entice you, do whatever it takes to trick your mind into like doing the thing, right?
Because our one viewer, Dr. Gabe, will show up and he'll be like, "Hey guys, where's the hobby going on?" In chat, and we'll be like, "Oh,
he'll be like, here's my oil paints. Look at how cool my oil paints are."
He's a maestro with that oil paint.
He really
His
is.
stuff's looking tight. Yeah. All right. So hobby. Let's real quick. I talked about Redgrass on Kickstarter. The only other Kickstarter I wanted to mention, and this will be important for reasons later, but Matt Forbeck is a game designer and writer. He did the Endless Quest D&D books. He's done some other stuff. He launched a Kickstarter today, Shotguns and Sorcery. It's like there's a 5e element to it, and I think there's an independent rule set. But so Paul and Jen, DK, wrote a book, which is out, Malcontent, set in the Ethereum world. And I think I saw Matt Forbeck had like retweeted it or tweeted about it, something. And then I realized that Jen and Paul know Matt Forbeck's sister. So long and short of it is I have an email in my inbox from Matt Forbeck saying, yes, I'd love to come talk to you guys about my Kickstarter. So we're going to get Matt Forbeck to talk about Shotguns and Sorcery on a future episode, probably the November episode. So check that out on Kickstarter. That's the one thing I wanted to touch on, because source books are cool. You can always use more to sit around your shelf and influence what games you want to play. I mean, they're always just
it's inspiration.
Open them up and check it out. Yeah,
it's inspiration fuel. At the very least, it inspires you in what you do run, and that's priceless.
So
for sure,
pretty cool to see that. There were a few other ones like. Hunter Entertainment put out another one that's kind of like an investigation today. I can't think of the name of it, but it's like this paranormal, psychological kind of thriller RPG element to it. There was just a whole bunch. There's like a laundry list that hit, and then I got updates on a few. It looks like a few of the ones I kickstarted last year are finally going to print, like the Old West zombie side, Dead or Alive. I have to fill out the backer survey for. I'm like, yes, I'm gonna have my cowboy zombies. Because that's what I need is another version of Zombicide to have 8 boxes of Kickstarter stuff arrive. Any of your Kickstarters, Troy, funding, coming in, shipping?
I did. Oh, yeah. I'm looking at it right here. Sorry, you guys can't see it's out of camera.
but,
weird.
Yeah. Dinosaur World, the next version of Dinosaur Island, Dinosaur World, which is kind of the version 2 of that, finally showed up. It was available at it was one of those ones where they actually had it for sale at Gen Con, but it wasn't in my hand yet as a backer. But again, I always feel okay if like the company asks permission. I mean, like they usually like, hey, we really feel, and we're like, yeah, we understand you need to make money, and shipping takes time. So, and again, I wasn't going to probably play it in the month between September and now anyway. So I have that here. So this happens to be, I'm literally looking at it because I don't have any room on the shelf behind me yet. I have to figure out how to like, how to get it into the shelf or what needs to
horn it in there.
You've got some height you can add. I see on that corner right there. You just stack another bookshelf.
But see, I'm already to the ceiling for over there.
But right next to it, over your left shoulder. Yeah.
Maybe I see. My wife has a moratorium on more. She's like, that's your shelving. Like you can't buy more games than space and I had to like negotiate getting this more space. So
Troy, I have a solution. You have to expand your basement's footprint. You've got to extend the foundation of your home and create a game shelf cave. So that shelf can move like a secret door. And if she doesn't pass her investigation check, she won't find the secret door. Send her and your daughter out of town for like a week and have them excavate and make like a gaming storage cave. It'll be a game cellar. It'll be like a wine cellar, but for games.
Yep. Well,
behind a hidden door.
I love that. I think I may send them out, and what I could do, I'll just build a false wall. I'll bring it in a little bit. They won't miss in 2 feet of the thing, and so of a false wall with a whole bunch of storage.
You can also, your property rights extend, and to quote a lawyer, all the way to hell. So you can actually infinitely deep. So you could just.
We're gonna add a lower floor.
Add a lower floor.
Basement.
Yeah, there you go.
Basement. Oh man!
Just make sure the waterproofing is really good.
Yeah, good waterproofing, and you might want to not compromise your foundation, but
this is where we probably have to add the disclaimer that none of us are structural engineers, and anything we recommend about doing to your basement, you should consult with an actual expert before you start excavating, digging, knocking out walls, messing with I-beams. We are not engineers. For any engineering questions, consult with an actual structural engineer. Thank you very much. We can't be sued. We don't have a lawyer on staff. Our lawyer became a judge, so we now are in search of a new lawyer. All right, let's go to library. Since we're talking about game sellers, we should talk about booksellers. That wasn't a good one. I apologize. I'll do better on the next transition.
No, I actually loved it. Like that wasn't even a pity laugh. Like the previous ones were pity laughs. That was a legit laugh. Like bookseller. It's a double entendre, you see, because I worked for Barnes and Noble. I was a floor manager, Barnes and Noble booksellers.
Yeah,
but here it was like a basement with books. Yeah. So
I sighed a little.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I am in the midst of Joe Abercrombie's third book in his most recent trilogy, Wisdom of Crowds, and I am savoring this one, listening slowly, then going back and reading the chapters I've listened to. So if I listen to like a chapter or two on the drive to work that night, I will read that chapter. So I'm reading it twice in essence, but I am totally absorbed in Wisdom of Crowds. And man, is it good. I'm not going to spoil anything, but this is like, I think the best third book of any trilogy I've ever read. Like it's just
phenomenal.
It's phenomenal how it is weaving things together and calling back to other things. And there's this subtext that is slowly meandering through the book that is just phenomenal. So if I haven't talked about how Joe Abercrombie is probably one of the best like fantasy writers working today. He is. I'm loving it. Haven't been reading anything else other than Wisdom of Crowds, but I've been watching a fair bit of TV. Succession season 3. That's like my current favorite show on HBO.
Same.
So my son turned 10, and if people judge me for this, that's fine. He's been wanting to watch scary movies and scary stuff, and we went back and started season 1 of Walking Dead, and started watching, Walking Dead season 1. And he's just completely absorbed. There's a couple parts where we skip past, and, Rick and Lori are reunited and they're like making out, and he's still grossed out by people kissing on TV. So,
Same.
we will, yeah. But we went back, we watched season 1 like over the last week or two. So I promised him this weekend, if he has a good week at school, we'll, start watching some of season 2. And he's enjoying it. We're enjoying rewatching it because my wife and I really enjoyed that show, at least the early seasons. And then I saw, Wheel of Time's coming up on Prime in November. If anyone read Robert Jordan's series, that was infinitely long. Will be interesting to see if first season covers like the first half of the book. But some of the trailers have looked really good. I'm excited for that. And then Witcher comes out season 2, I think, in December. So there's some good TV coming up on the streaming services as well. But I got to figure out what I'm going to read next too. Abercrombie has sent me into a rabbit hole. So I might have to do like a hard switch back to, like a true crime or mystery or something, just totally out of the sci-fi fantasy realm, to come back to Earth after reading.
I can help you with that.
Speaking of Joe Abercrombie, I started reading The Blade itself.
Fantastic.
How's that for a transition?
That's great. How are you enjoying it?
Yeah, Logan Ninefinger is one of the best characters ever written in anything. Yes. You can fight me on the internet if you want.
Yes. He's great. He's great.
He is the Bloody Nine.
Yeah. It started a little slow, and I was like, okay, no, this is cool. Like, it's just setting things up. That's fine. And then it like hits a point, and you're like, all right, I'm in. This is great. This is awesome. I'm really excited to see what happens. I'm enjoying it. I'm interested. So I'm about halfway, 2/3 through, and I'm really interested to see like what happens. Like I'm invested. It's great. I'm a fan.
Wonderful.
But yeah, some of the watching lately, and maybe it's applicable to the spooky month. But yeah, Midnight Mass.
So good.
Super good. It's like weird to start, and you're like, what's happening? And then you're like, oh, I know what's happening. Yeah.
We've only watched the first episode, and the cat's on the beach. I was like, oh shit.
Yeah. Can I nerd interject?
Just
a minute.
Yeah.
Mike Flanagan is probably the best horror writer director currently working, like in the sphere. Like how the Haunting of Hill House was excellent. Now I know it got trendy to hate on it for a little bit because it got popular. I see through you, contrarians. You just jelly. You didn't get it. Like, it's so good. Like, I probably like that better than Midnight Mass. But Midnight Mass, like, first off, the attention to detail in that first episode is so stellar. They're like right down to the posters in the scene, setting you up for like episode 2, 3. Oh, like just table flip, like so good. And there's a scene in like, I think it's episode, no spoilers. There's a scene in episode 4 where two characters have like some dialogue. One character has such the stronger dialogue in the scene as to be laughably bad, that the other characters is so kind of like phoned in, and you're just like, what the heck? And it's jarring in a sense that you completely pick up on it. Like, so like it's either deliberate or pure neglect, right? And you're like, for a minute there, I'm like, oh man, I didn't want to have to like have something to hate about the series, but I'm gonna remember this one when I go get angry on the internet later. And something happens in the final episode that recontextualizes the whole series so well, it completely flips who had the better dialogue.
Oh wow.
In real time, when you're sitting there going like, like it like I said, like I think Haunting of Hill House is the spectacle of Haunting of Hill House and the sort of popcorn ability, like the popcorn quality of it, makes it probably better. But Mike Flanagan as a horror writer does what I love in horror, which is writes from a place of compassion. Cynical horror is easy to do. You gross people out, you jump scare them, you have some characters that you don't like, you kill them off, or a character that you do like and you're cynical about it because you're like, I'm going to get you to like this teenage kid and I'm going to murder it. Ha 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 ha, and you're laughing at your audience. Mike Flanagan doesn't do that. He has a compassion for every character written in the script, including, and this is especially key, the villains. You will hate Bev so much the whole time up until the last minute of the film. You hate her. It's the Friday the 13th. I want to watch the teenage get murdered. That's how much I don't like them. And then you feel so bad about it where it goes, and you're just like, fuck you, Mike. Like he's so good. And it, go ahead. Sorry.
Did you see what he's bringing next to Netflix?
No.
Did you hear?
No.
The Fall of the House of Usher. Poe. He's doing Poe.
Okay. Okay. I liked Doctor Sleep, by the way, and here's some blasphemy. I like Doctor Sleep better than The Shining. And I'm prepared to defend this. So when Stephen King wrote The Shining, he was currently battling alcoholism.
Yeah.
Right. And it's practically a biopic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's cynical horror again. It's very cynical. When he wrote Doctor Sleep, he had recovered. You're always kind of like a recovering alcoholic, right? He had recovered, and essentially you have two stories, completely different stories, and the lens switch that happens in Doctor Sleep, as the book. I mean, I'm still talking about King here. Is essentially where he goes with that story is a better story to tell, quite frankly, as a kind of semi-self-loathing person who may or may not have like an issue with alcohol, writer myself. I like where Dr. Sleep goes. Mike Flanagan keyed in on the most important part of that story and brought it to the film, which is essentially a story of getting through trauma, and not just addiction, getting through trauma with hope and essentially camaraderie of friendship. And what is perfect about it, and this goes back to the compassion even for his villains, Rose with the Hat has as much compassion written into her and as much to say about trauma and camaraderie, but just the inverse. It's and like I said, Mike Flanagan, especially in the director's cut, keys in on that. And when you hear about the greatest directors in horror of all time, like hearing about like literally slapping the actors to get them to cry, and like in Psycho, Hitchcock absolutely harassed everybody on set to get the like the most potent from like all the cast he's worked with, especially the children in like in Haunting of Hill House and in Doctor Sleep, like brilliantly, like also lauded for like their brilliant child acting, which is difficult to pull off. He did it from a place of like compassion and sort of like friendship and being nice to them, and not a bag, which is really I'm gonna find out that he's a serial killer at some point, like in like 10 years. Like he's just like murdered so many people, and all this praise, I'm just be like, no, like in like 10 years. But for now, like love everything he's doing. Sorry.
No, I'm stoked to watch it. Like my wife loves the genre of horror, like Stephen King books and films, and I've always been, I watch it, but I think the jumps, the you know, the cynical horror slasher films jump cut, like I'm like, oh, that's cute, but I've never bought it. So like when you find something that has that compelling story, that has that depth of character and follows, you know, some, not, I don't want to call them tropes of the genre, but you know, they're components of the genre that are weaved in a little bit. It's rare to find. So I want to see what he does with, because I haven't watched Hill House, and I have not watched what was it? Did he do Bly Manor?
Bly Manor, yeah.
But my wife did and loved both of them, and we're gonna watch we're watching Midnight Mass. We're one episode in, so we've got to find some time to watch the rest of it.
See, I don't, like I said, I rank Haunting a Hill House a little bit higher than, just because the popcorn flick. For me, horror, like where you talk about like some of the tropes and leaning into it. For me, horror, I like that love letter to horror, the sort of winking at the audience, like buying into the tropes a little bit, quality to horror. But Midnight Mass has those moments where I just went, damn. Like, I guess the high points are like a lot higher, but Hill House puts it all together really well, and the rewatchability of Hill House, where you're like on that second watch through, you're looking for all the like hidden like Easter eggs and stuff. Now that you're like aware, there's that sort of a priceless quality. Like, horror is perhaps one of the most simultaneously transgressive and like sort of meta genres in anything. Like, it's the opposite of what fantasy is. Fantasy kind of forces, like, you have the tropes of fantasy.
Yeah.
And if you don't, in a way, we're like, okay, this is my world where elves are elves, but they're different. And like, there's a balancing act where fantasy fans will be like, screw you. And like, they're just mad. You know, like there's this delicate thing where to identify as fantasy, you kind of got to stay in the box. You got to have something that sells people, whether it's a dragon showing up, you have to sell people. And to do that, you have to like use what is essentially establishment fantasy stuff. Now, horror has that, but like the best horror ever received is the stuff that on purpose subverts it. You know, Scream is lauded as like one of probably the greatest modern slasher. And I'd be hard pressed to disagree. And that is a movie that so firmly lives in the meta awareness of what horror even is, but still gets you scared. You know, like, it's literally telling you the formula as it's murking people with the formula. It's, you know, it's telling you its own rules and then just like killing people with them. And it's so, you know, like, so there's something to that, like, where like horror fans, like fantasy fans, are the biggest like nerds that there are. It's just one of
for that thing. Yeah,
for that thing. It's just like, I don't know. It feels like fantasy gets a little stuffy sometimes, where they're like, you gotta have a wizard in it, or it's not really fantasy, or you know, like something. But like, oh, your wizard's just Gandalf, and so you have to like have a wizard in it, but not have your wizard be a Gandalf ripoff. It's so weird. Whereas horror's like, oh yeah, he's a Jason ripoff.
Yeah.
What? Come at me. And the people are like, you're right. He is a Jason. Oh, you acknowledged it. Like, all right, like we can have fun now. Like.
That's fantastic. I can't wait to watch it now. Yeah. Josh, I think we went down that
that was my
murder
fault,
hole.
Josh. Sorry.
No, you're good, man.
That's great.
Everything he just said. I'm on board. Yeah, so I watched the Guilty, Jake Gyllenhaal, which is,
you mean Donnie Darko,
right?
I will never call him Jake Gyllenhaal. Like, when I describe him, it's Donnie Darko.
Super good movie. Donnie
Darko is fantastic. I agree.
It takes place, I think, 100% in a 911 call office, and it's mainly just him. And the whole, like, it's still compelling. It's still like really good. You know, it's like that whole you know, Tom Hanks thing, you know, where it's just him on an island with a volleyball named Wilson, right? I mean, he's not alone in the 911 office, but it's essentially him and voice actors like telling this story. I don't know, it's really good. I thought it was awesome.
Interesting.
And then I'm sure a lot of us watched Dune, but super good, big fan. I never read the book or books. I don't know how books. Yeah. But yeah,
it's okay.
Yeah,
it seriously is okay. A bunch of nerds out there like use Dune as like some sort of litmus test for your nerd cred.
Yeah,
just call them nerds. It's fine. It's a chore to read all of Dune, and that's before freaking Herbert's son or whatever
His son picked up and
it's a chore.
I am interested, and I also watched Dune, and that I am interested. Interesting that you say that, Josh, because as I watched the movie, I was trying to figure out if someone who hadn't read the book because if you read the book, you're watching a movie, you're filling in so much context and
Right.
stuff. And I was like, I'm like, is this good for somebody who hasn't read the book, or are they lost for that first, I don't know, 45
Well,
minutes or something?
All I know
like
is
that.
the spice must flow. Will I understand the movie?
Sure.
I
I'll-
played a Dune board game this weekend, so
there you
I
go.
feel like I now am prepared to watch the movie.
You're fine. Yeah, you're fine. Don't worry.
Keep it flowing. Yep.
And
No,
sandworms.
I felt like it filled in enough. I mean, yes, like any movie or any story, right? The beginning, you're trying to catch up, right?
How? Who's
but-
more attractive in it? Timothy Chalamet or Oscar Isaac?
Jason Momoa.
Yes, there you go.
It wasn't. No, he's a different pinnacle of male attractiveness.
Well, I mean, that's the one for me. For this guy,
If I was a teenage girl, I think I'd be swooning over Timothy Chalamet.
yeah.
I swoon over him anyway. Like,
Yeah.
I'm comfortable enough.
It's those cheekbones.
Well, yeah.
His jawline. All right, so Josh, I'm about ready to take us down another rabbit hole.
Well, I don't get to say what I've been reading. Oh,
yeah. I was gonna go to Andrew and then to Troy for the what you've been reading, because we know Troy keeps us honest. Well, we're all watching stuff on TV and streaming. Troy reads actual books. But Andrew, what is currently satisfying your need for words?
So the first thing on my list is I've been reading back through Sandman.
Nice.
And I'll give you the abridged version of this because the guy with the show called RantCasts has already ranted several times. I know everyone's like super surprised. It turns out that might be an ADHD thing, by the way, everyone. And
So it's not just a clever name.
no, no, it's not just a Wayne's World reference. Nice.
There you go.
Yeah, boom. So Sandman, I got to this point where I was just like going. I'm like having that like sort of mental health crises. This last summer, especially, I think like 2020, I just kind of went into like survival mode and blocked out a bunch of stuff, and then like it all kind of like it was just kind of like jogging, and I looked to the sun. I'm like, oh shit! It, like caught me, and like and so I'm like, oh no, I need escapism, and I'm like just hitting all the buttons, like trying to find all my escapism that normally like soothes me. And for some reason, I'm just like, I need to read Sandman. Like I'm just like, I need to read it again. I haven't read this since like my mid-20s, so it's been at least 10 years. I'm like, I need to read this again. And I'm like, I know it's not like the like hopiest, like the most hopium brightest story one could consume, but for me, like sometimes I jive more with the darker stuff. Actually makes me feel better. Like maybe that's why I like horror too. Anyway, so I'm like, I just need to read Sandman. No regrets. Like I've been like reading it, just like basically like going through as one should, slowly digesting it before bed every night, like taking in the visuals, reading like a bit of dialogue, moving on, and just like I'm going through this, and I put it on such a pedestal in my mind as the single greatest comic book ever written, right? True. And in some ways, I just like I never touched it again. I read Why the Last Man and Saga and these other comics that I would like were creeping up on the memory of how good Sandman was for me. I'm like, all right, I got to read this. And it's just as good. Like it's better than I remember it, because like some of the like subtext and like the that I glossed over before as a kid, or some of the like the trauma stuff that I couldn't handle, and I skimmed and read through quicker, and now where I'm just like sitting there and I'm like, it's been blowing my mind. So I've been doing like I just volume 4 is sitting up on my headboard right now, so that's what I'll read a couple pages of before I head to bed, and that's been great. So
I'm not gonna let you move off Sandman, since I actually have another someone here who's there. So have you listened to season 2 on Audible yet? I have not. But that was like my trip back in last summer. Again, summer 2020, right? Whatever, right? Some version of hell. And that was listening to that, and then it immediately made me go back and read the book, and again, and just same thing. Like I was always worried, like, is my memory going to hold up to as good as the book? And it was even better. And I'll foreshadow a little bit. I have the annotated versions of Sandman, the first one, which are excellent because somebody went through and they added all the basically notes around every page because Gaiman makes references to everything, right? He's making mythical references and everything on every page.
Yeah.
And reading it in that format too is just another experience because a lot of it you get, but then it's Easter eggs. You're uncovering more and more Easter eggs on that. So yeah, and I'm excited to kind of dive in on season 2 on Audible too because I think it's another one. And then the Netflix series they're starting to dribble that out a little bit, and that's going to be another. Again, it's one of those ones where I'm worried like, is it going to hold up to as good as the source material is? How can you ever? And Gaiman seems to be involved, so it should be good. And I'm interested in there. It'll be an interpretation, I think, of the book.
It doesn't have to, like the remakes and reboots and stuff. Like I'm pretty light on them. I go into them with the lowest possible expectations just so I can be pleasantly surprised because I'm so used to being let down by like the remakes and the reboots.
Yeah.
Yep. But like that is sort of establishing shot we got in the trailer is like picture perfect of like the sort of summoning scene.
Yep.
Like picture like I don't know what they went with the eyes with the lead actor. They're not all like, like that look like stars to me. Like they don't do that. I'm like, that's a choice, I'm like, yeah, okay. Could have easily done some contacts or something with, but all right, that's a choice. It makes Morpheus dream feel less otherworldly with the like looking rather normal. So I don't know. I don't want to get my hopes up. It'll be good. It'll be fine. Netflix has produced just some quality stuff, and if you have the artists themselves at least along to advise, they should be in the right realm. I've like with Dr. Sleep, there's been a lot of like reboots or remakes lately that have given me a lot of hope for it. And I think it is that difference between like the cynical creation of it and the love letter creation of it is like finally the people who are the fans of the stuff are making the stuff.
Yeah.
And so like you had this part where it was like studios like, well, what's selling right now? Oh, well, we need I'm not going to hate to harsh on the TMNT movie because I think it's great. But I don't know how much of that is my like nostalgia or not. But they're like, oh, like these action figures are selling. Let's make a movie out of that. Like, that's sort of like cynical, like cash grab. Like, let's just make the thing because it's working well over here in this medium. Like, so obviously just make it as a movie. And so they kind of like you have these like sort of studio execs like bring on people onto a project and they just make the thing. And Sandman has been something that has failed to be made for like 20 years into a film or film series. I know Joseph Gordon-Levitt was trying to get it going there for a little bit. Like everyone's tried to make this movie, or series. And I think we just weren't ready for it because the sort of binge watch format wasn't really. I mean, you had like Twin Peaks and The Sopranos, and like that was it in that sort of same time span, right?
Yeah.
So we're ready. We're ready for it. So hopefully it's good. But yeah, I read that or have been reading that. That's an ongoing process. And the other thing that's really just been in my head is Gideon the Ninth, by Tamsin Muir. I'm not certain how to pronounce her name. It's like Gorman Gastian, like sort of cosmic horror in space with like space necromancers and like it balances like being sort of like the gothic horror framework with like some real tongue-in-cheek, like almost like meme lord style humor. It's actually pretty great. Like it's thoroughly great. Like I'd like to think that if my soul wrote a book, it would be something like this. So like not me, but like just like the purified distillate of things that I love being made into like a book series.
Yeah,
Space
I
necromancers.
really like that book. It surprised the hell. Like you don't know, like you go into it, and I think I mentioned it when I read it. Like I had no, I'd kind of like people. I knew it was people are saying, yeah, this is really good and whatever. You look at the cover, you're kind of like, oh, it seems like some maybe fantasy
edgelordy
kind of
like
thing, right?
Yeah.
And you get in, and it's just it's necromancers in space. But the dialogue, I just love the dialogue and the
snappy,
and the humor and the characters in there. I have not read Harrow the Ninth, the second book, is on my list because I enjoyed that first one so much. I'm excited to kind of get into the next one, see where it goes.
Yeah, and then watching just a bunch of horror movies. Like, if you haven't
One a
seen,
day, right? One or two a day, or
yeah, one or two a day. I've got so people on YouTube got this coffin here with 31 days. It's been 31. Yeah,
The platform was today. I saw that.
yeah, Spanish, a Spanish horror movie. Now this one, I'm still making my mind up on whether it's cynical horror or if it is sort of sympathetic horror, because it wears its metaphor on its sleeve. This is not, this is like Annihilation. Annihilation is very overt with the sort of like cancer and pain and people we meet. Like the metaphor is not subtext; it is text. In Annihilation, same thing with the platform. Like, this is a takedown of capitalism. Like, this is just literally it's on a platform, it goes up. The part where it's like maybe cynical is like the characters essentially all buy into the system. And as they're buying into the system, so it's like, well, I'm still gonna, but I like that. I like finishing a movie and still going, huh. Especially a horror movie. When you finish a horror movie, you're like, now it's pretty gruesome. Where you're just like, oh, like there's some pretty like, torture porn, gore-esque scenes in that. But like, yeah, it's pretty good. I guess the most recent horror movie I've personally seen that's like affected me, but tons of horror movies. Psycho Goreman we did live on, well, not live. We can't do it live, but we did a watch party in Discord, which is just like a tokusatsu film became Jason, like just like total just mayhem. There's even like a magic girl transformation sequence in it, like, and then it's just this like horror movie, like this heavy metal horror movie where it's just like the gore is over the top. The main character's like, the main villain, the antagonist, is like sitting there standing behind this little girl who's got this gem to control him, and the parents are like just terrified, and they're like, and the daughter's like, oh, like, you have no reason to be afraid, and she's like, be very afraid. I will torture you all and just consume your souls, and just like this. So that was really great on Shudder. Shudder's the best $5 a month you can spend on a streaming service if you're a horror fan. Not that I get any kickback, but like I paid, it's $60. If you do $60, you get the whole year, right? And I was like, I'd forgotten that I had paid last year already, and I had just been enjoying Shudder for the whole year. And I'm like, oh yeah, like until it came out of my bill, I'm like, I've only been paying $5. I feel like I'm robbing somebody for this much great horror films. So yeah, lots of horror stuff. I love this time of year. I watch horror movies all year round though, so that during this time of the year I can tell other people what spooky stuff to watch to, like, get in the mood.
Your off-season training regimen is what powers you through this Mephtober.
Right. That's it. Yeah.
Troy, anything else from? I know you're usually reading something 40K or Horus Heresy.
Yes.
So I'm going to guess that you've got something like that to tell us about.
I do. Number 6 in the Horus Heresy Siege of Terra series, Warhawk came out. It kind of surprised me. It just there wasn't a lot of fanfare around it. Jumped out, so I am listening to that. I am almost to the end. It is the Khan Jagatai of the White Scars versus Motarian and the Death Guard.
So is that all the discussion with Heath and Dan about White Scars army that Heath is painting in Warhawk?
Because that's what.
Okay.
Yeah, because all of a sudden I saw Heath like, oh, I'm starting a White Scars Horus Heresy army out of the blue. It seemed like out of the blue, and I'm like, and I just had picked up Warhawk, which is.
Yeah, I need you to like let me know when references are being made to literature that's 40K or heresy, because that's the chink in my armor. That's my Achilles heel, is what it all means. So I'm going to need you to do better to inform me, so that references like that in hobby banter and other segments of the Discord that I'm less knowledgeable about, like, you got to be my inside man that can say, okay, Ty, so this is a reference to the Khan, the guy that's the leader of the White Scars. Yes, the Marines that ride bikes. I go, okay, I'm with you. And then you can be like, and now the book Warhawk talks about him and his involvement.
I just got an idea for a skit. Okay, here, I'm going to pitch this. All right, so the Key and Peele like anger translator bit.
Yeah,
do that, but with like You could do it with 40K, like have like Troy as like the 40K like translator. It just like follows you behind scene to scene, and like anytime there's like a 40K reference or something like that, like just or
Bro, would be
Space Marines are
perfect
fighting
for
each other.
it. Oh,
So that
I'm sorry, Troy. I keep
that's good.
doing
So
this
that
to you.
is no,
I
that's
apologize.
good. That is Warhawk, and we're on book 6 out of 8 supposedly. I am.
Who's going to write the last one?
I think it's ADB. I think it's Aaron Dempsey Bowden. I think that's what
Okay.
he's been like. It's I imagine it's either
Abnett?
him or Abnett. There's 2 left, and this is. I feel like not to kind of down on Warhawk. Warhawk just feels like, all right, they have to do they have to get the white.
Well, it's the
Scars
6th book. It's getting
right.
you to the penultimate and,
to
then the
right,
finale. I mean,
and they're
it's the
basically
bridge.
They're in there. Everything's fallen down. You're at the gory end. So the last 2, I think, are really now okay. We're gonna bring it home. So it should be interesting. So I mean, I'm not gonna. I don't know where I'll rank them in Warhawk. It's pretty good, but
easy
unfortunately, it feels like
rank 'em.
yet another one of the Siege of Terra books before we get to the end. So, but again, if you love
they haven't killed my
Scars,
boy yet, though, have they?
I'm not going to tell you anything. Motarian is he needed his time in the sun too. So that's kind of what this book is all about. Again,
You mean this guy?
Yep. So he gets it's really the death card get there.
Does he have his wings yet?
Yes, he does.
By Mortarian's wings.
Yeah. Which is, I don't think that's really a saying, but
it is.
Who's the main Slanesh like Chaos Space Marine trader?
Fulgrim.
Fulgrim. Is Fulgrim like absolutely fabulous in Siege on Terror?
No, he was kind of a wimp. Like he basically
what?
Well, he's like it's kind of funny. Like the Chaos Primarchs are basically at some they're kind of uncontrollable. Like Fulgrim was just like in true Slanesh form was just like, I'm gonna come. Horus is like, go down and do this, and Fulgrim's like, I don't really want to do this. I just want to kind of go, destroy and have fun and whatever. He's basically as an army, he's a terrible general, right? So it's kind of funny how in the Siege of Terra they basically kind of talk about, these guys are great monsters and basically unkillable, but they're really terrible as strategic assets because they don't do anything Horus really wanted them to do. And so he came in. I can't think who I think it was Sanguinius might have fought.
Oh, my other favorite, or my favorite on the.
I think maybe it was Dorn that got rid. That kind of, but I don't know. He's off, and the same thing. Like Angron is just like off on his own, like
having a temper tantrum.
Just punching holes in drywall somewhere.
Right,
like,
but he may not be headed in the right direction. Who knows what he's going? So it is kind of interesting. It is kind of the balance of the true chaos versus order, but order's losing, as you know, if you don't. No spoilers in the heresy, but
Yeah. See, I'm disappointed that Fulgrim didn't just like do the bender. Like, I'm gonna go make my own heresy with blackjack and hookers. Like all the cocaine. Like, oh man.
Fulgrim's just in Vegas. Yep. He's at Caesars in a penthouse suite.
Right? Yeah. He's like, I don't. Why are we going at this palace? There's this huge other hive over here. In
the Peppermint Rhino.
Yeah.
Games Workshop, have me write your what if, like cash grab Siege of Terra later.
It could be the new Warhammer Plus show to actually warrant paying $6 a month for something. Oh, sorry.
We'll get you. All right, I'll wrap up quick. For Bryce, he's not here. It's a little old, but I didn't realize it. There's another audio series on Spotify. I think it was done by Stitcher originally in the Marvel universe. It's actually an interpretation of the Marvels comic written by, I think, Kurt Busiek. Its claim to fame was all this gorgeous Alex Ross art. That was kind of the Fantastic Four, and I think it's the Watcher and some of that. So there's a really cool audio drama of that that's out there that by the same group that kind of had done. I think they had done the 2 Wolverine series a couple of years ago. It's not. I don't think it's super new. I think it came out either last year or before. I just happened to discover it, and it was a fun listen for that. And then last one, I have not read it, but in similar themes that I was talking about with a little Neil Gaiman overload, I did find an annotated version of American Gods, which, and again, this is another one of these books, like probably my favorite book ever. It's hard for me to place it in there, but I have not reread it in a decade or more probably. So I'm actually, this might be get me to kind of go back through it because I'm really interested in, again, there's so many kind of Easter eggs and references that Gaiman makes in that book. I'm excited to kind of go back and read that. So
That's what makes Gaiman such a great writer, though, is like the unabashed but intelligent sort of nerd, like the pop culture references woven in, and sometimes some historical references and stuff like that you just don't catch, but because he's thinking about them as he writes it, the world is so rich in a way that you pick up on, even if you don't get that, like, sort of all the Easter eggs. Like it's so good. Yeah, American Gods is one of those that's on my, like, I got to read this again. I haven't watched I guess there's like some Netflix or
and
Amazon.
actually, I think Josh has
I haven't watched it,
and I actually never have really caught up with the TV series. I heard that's pretty good, but
yeah, I thought it was pretty good.
Maybe I'll check it out. But I don't know, like it's weird, like, because with, like, we were talking about like Sandman there for a minute. Like Sandman as a comic is like the perfect one of my favorite things. It's like I know that the TV show's not for me because, like, I don't need another perfect iteration of the thing that's already perfect in my soul, and so, like, I have no drive to really necessarily watch Sandman except to introduce it to Molly because I could never get her to read a comic book, and be like, see, this is that comic book I love a bunch, but that's about it, or indoctrinate my kids if it's appropriate, for the age, which it won't be, shouldn't be. There's some stuff.
Yeah.
Corinthian and there's some stuff in there. But like American Gods is, like, for me, it just sat as the definitive urban fantasy. Like, it's just the this is what 10 out of 10 perfect score looks like. It's so hard to approach that again and be like, oh no, do I compromise this and, like, look at it again, or does it just stay holy,
Yep.
But
I don't know if I've ever shared with you, Andrew, one of the most surreal, awesome experiences I've ever had is we were literally driving to House on the Rock, listening, and I basically, like, wait, and listening to that chapter in American Gods where they're traveling from Chicago up to Wisconsin, and basically you're hitting, like, whatever, I'm trying to think, what is it, Black Earth, right? And it's just hitting, and being in there in real life, it was just this really weird, mix of reality. And there is, if you go to House on the Rock, there's a scene with the fortune teller vendor machine, and going to that, it's a real thing that's in a fictional book. It's just that, and it's so weird. So it was so weird and so awesome that it's an experience I'm never going to forget. That's
amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. Yeah, I've never been to the House on the Rock. Maybe I'll have to do it.
You've
I'm just gonna.
Oh, now you're really missing something.
So I remember going when I was younger. My wife took our son actually once each the last 2 summers because he loves it. There's so much random stuff, and it's like, it's probably about an hour and a half, 2-hour drive from Milwaukee. So, probably just slightly more from where you're at, Andrew, a little bit north of us. But, like, Landon thinks it's the coolest place in the world. And he's telling me, he's like, do you remember this room? Then there's this room, but I don't think you'd like it now because you'd have to duck down. And I'm like, yeah, the last time I was there, I didn't have to duck down. I was your size. But yeah, it's that place is a trip.
So we're gonna do. Go ahead. Sorry, Troy.
No, I was just saying it is a trip. I mean, you go there and you like, it was like, as a kid, you're like just amazed at all the craziness. As an adult, you're like, I think this guy was some version of insane. Like, you're like, I don't know what, but he was some very rich guy who you're like, yeah, definitely what maybe not wasn't all there or was very had some.
If Cthulhu is real, he certainly begs the question of what kind of dark gods did he summon?
Yep.
Well, I mean, this is we're gonna talk about RPGs once we get into the topic proper, right? Like,
yes.
I mean, this touches on one of the things I believe pretty firmly in RPGs is use real stuff. Like it's why like modern whether it's like World of Darkness or doing like a D20 modern style thing can be so compelling because you can 1-to-1 grab the real stuff. Like you just grab the House of the Rock. Like how cool would it be if the characters are in a Cthulhian horror and then you're like, oh, just use the House on the Rock. Boom, you're there.
Yeah.
There's magic, you get teleported to it. Here's puzzles. Like deal with the puzzles and like don't go too crazy or your characters are dead. Like you just use that stuff. And then like if you're doing fantasy, you have to do sort of like a 1-to-2 conversion rate or something like that. But I don't know, like Neil Gaiman's doing that in like one of the best books ever written is essentially using reality and then kind of making it hyper real, right? And that's the sweet stuff, right? It's easy for someone to visualize something that's like normal, and it's easy to add spice to that for them to like get that too, like. And so I think that makes for really compelling storytelling.
Is House on the Rock, is that Spring Green?
Yes, I believe so. Yep.
I think, right?
Yep.
Same place that they do the outdoor Shakespeare in summertime. Spring Green, Wisconsin is worth the trip. Yeah. So here we are talking about it. For us, it's a short drive, but it is one of those places that is like a destination for residents of our state for some reason. Like it's just, it draws people.
Well, according to American Gods, it is a place of power. So sorry,
absolutely. All right, let's do this. Let's take a short break as we get prepared to dive into the mind of Mephisto and talk about our RPG sponsor himself. When we used to do our campaign updates, I mean, you were a sponsor for a number of episodes.
I did, yeah.
And when we get back, we will drive into the story time segment with Meph. And we, unlike Rage of Sigmar, are back. And with us is our wonderful guest, Mr. Mephisto, Andrew. This is the segment where you and I will likely talk more than anyone really wants to hear about role-playing games of all kinds and
Fools.
Deep, dark narrative, tunnels will be
gonna get in the guts of RPGs, right? Like
we're gonna go so deep that we also will dig too far, like the dwarves in Moria, and unleash our own Balrog, which will be Josh and Troy telling us to stop talking. But before we get there, I alluded to it earlier in the show. I want to talk a little bit about Rantathon. So, this is something that we've talked about on our show with you, not with you previously, but about you and what you do. But want to just talk a little bit about the contributions that have been made through RantCast and the Rantathon for Mental Health America for 2 years running, right? That was 2 years in a row. Well over $20,000 in those 2 years.
No. $10,000 this year, 10,600 this year is 7,200 last year. If you count like the little side charities I've done, where I've like done 1,000 there and 1,000 there on Twitter.
We're calling it 20.
Okay, all right.
We're calling it 20. Rantathon itself sub 20, but your larger charitable presence.
Yeah, it's gone over. It's gone over 20.
Either way, a tremendous amount of money raised and points back. You've talked about the community, and it is. I can't point to a better example of a community coming together than kind of what we've seen from and to say local it's not even local. It's like worldwide. I mean, the Australians, UK, like the Just Play guys. I mean, it's a small army of international folks that have made that possible. But I'll hand it off to you. I mean, just you want to talk a little bit about it, especially this year and the success of it, and anyone that you want to mention. I'll hand off the microphone, so to speak, to talk a little rantathon.
Yeah, I'm gonna try not to be like too hammy here, but it was an accident. like all great things that began with spite, right? I think in general, like I'm a more charitable guy than a not charitable guy, and I'm hard on my sleeve sort to who'd glad you give you the shirt off my back, but I give you the shirt off my back because like I don't need the shirt. I've got more shirts, right? Like that's kind of but basically someone was criticizing how long my shows were for just the regular rant cast. They're just like, man, your shows are so long. And then I accidentally did a 7-hour one, just totally on accident.
Accidental 7-hour
yeah, just an accidental 7-hour show, like a full like punch in the clock. If you get a 1 hour like paid lunch, you just put in an 8-hour shift on a podcast, right? Like it was yeah, I accidentally did a 7-hour show, and I was just kind of like, I got done with that show, and I was just like, this person had been giving me shit about my shows, and just like, I'm like, yeah, that's that was too long. I'm never doing that again. Who's going to watch a 7-hour show, type thing? And I'm like, by the way, lots of people, like, it's like over 2,000 views or something like that, with like having been watched. Where you can look at the analytics on it. I'm like, wow, people actually sat through like 2 hours of this, and they barely sit through like half an hour of like my like shorter shows. Awesome. But no, it was no, I'm joking a little bit, but there was that moment where you're like, yeah, this is too much. Like this is too far. That one of those, like, I don't know where the line is until I've crossed it type thing, because the shows have a very organic, my rant cast has a pretty organic feel to it. I go in with like a premise, few questions, like a couple, like what I call anchor points that I want to get across, and then it's mostly just a conversation with the guest to discover those adjacencies I talked about earlier. Like I had a guy on talking about Street Fighter, and like, what's similar about Street Fighter in this. I've had Alex Milonis from the Pants Mafia on multiple times talking like psychology and positive psychology and Warhammer, and like just sort of like how Warhammer can be a vessel for just like just personal betterment and just making your life feel a little bit cooler, man. Like doing stuff like that, just like weird shows. Just don't watch my show. It's garbage. Like it's not about. It's the only Warhammer show not about
Warhammer.
It's the
well. To be fair, though, your show, I would say, and I would argue, it is about Warhammer, but it's about the people that play and kind of what they bring to. Like, you do a really good job of whoever your guest is. Being, allowing it to go in a very natural and organic direction as to what their interests are, what they're passionate in. And it was funny because we did that one with Brendan and Travis, and we tried to pretend we were going to talk about Warhammer, and we spent 2.5 hours talking about Giannis, the Milwaukee Bucks versus Phoenix Suns, and basketball and sports
that was
talk
episode 100
radio. Yeah, that was 100.
Yeah, that was episode 100. Yeah.
Like, and we tried. It was thinly veiled.
We tried so
Warhammer,
hard, like
gaming, and then we just
and then it was gone. Like it's for like my favorite episodes are episodes like that. To be quite honest, like I love the ones where like we don't even really have a veneer of this is about Warhammer, but like to have people who want a Warhammer show, but they want the other stuff, and that's kind of where it was like the Rantathon was coming together as this like, how do I give back to the people of this, because I don't do my show for me. I don't have aspirations of being a full-time content creator. I have aspirations of being a full-time writer who like makes it and is a writer now, and that gets to be my job, and then I can have my writer podcast that all is just shameless promotion for me at all times, right? Like that's a goal, but it's not to like, I don't want to, if Warhammer and making content and being a nerd becomes commoditized, like who I am becomes the brand and the commodity, and that sucks. And the best way of like taking the success I was having and sort of parlaying that into not it being a job was being a charity, right? Like, is to just take this tiny platform I was starting to see success with. I'm starting to like get stuff. You know, people want to send me stuff. I'm like, I don't want your stuff. Like, I just want to make my silly show. Maybe buy a T-shirt, but I want you to buy the T-shirt because it's a joke. Like, I want you to buy into the joke, and that money goes to like I basically hand my money into like these various charitable causes anyway. Because it's just not. Again, it's not that. And I didn't even know I was going to do that until I just recorded an episode that was too long. And then people were just like, they started like kind of hassling me, and they're like, well, how could we get you to record like a longer show, or you know, how could we make you break this promise that you're not going to ever do a 7-hour show again? Like, ha ha ha. Just like all, and you know how the internet is like this sort of memey, sort of trollish, you know, messing with you kind of vibe. But in the Warhammer community, it's usually in good faith, and like, you know, if you, especially when you know the people on Twitter who they really are in reality, and you see them at tournaments, like you get more of a feel for who's kind of giving you some, you know, who's kind of giving you some, you know, giving you some shit or whatever. You know it's coming from a better place, right, than just some random troll. So, you know, that's sort of like going on, and I've been streaming, and I've been a gamer, and I've had an online persona for a long time, going all the way back to like before Kotaku got bought by like Polygon or OneUp or whoever it was that bought them out. You know, I've been around a while. My YouTube channel is like embarrassingly old for for like how bad it's doing. But so I used to do for
Folks,
my
like
birthday.
and subscribe. Go
Like
to
and subscribe.
Mr Mephisto's
No, to
YouTube.
this one, Playin and Slayin, right now. Like and subscribe. I need the validation via them. I need the residual heat. This is the De Niro speech, or sorry, not Al Pacino speech in Devil's Advocate. I'm just warming my hands by your fire. Like,
Oh yeah.
give me the residual heat. I need to know that this episode on YouTube is the best episode they do on YouTube.
It will be. Don't worry.
Okay. All right.
It's only going to take five views, and I think
like and subscribe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I used to do like a birthday tradition, is I do like a 24-hour stream. So I knew I had a 24-hour show in me.
Okay.
You know, like I'm like, I can do 24 hours. And so like we kind of like sensed out the upward limit of how long of a possible show could Mephisto do. And we landed on 27 hours for the simple fact that 27 hours, very technically speaking, is not 7 hours. But then you have a nice little like synergy with the 7 hours and so on and so forth. And all I had was a start collecting Beasts of Chaos. Because I had like, when you play Beasts of Chaos, you buy like 7 start collecting boxes. This is why every Beasts of Chaos player has just like a million Gorgons. They don't know what to do with them. They're useless. Like, the box is so efficient. It's like you could buy all those models, or you could get a free Great Bray Shaman and a free Gorgon with it. And so like I had like a, you know, you know, so I had like this start collecting box. I'm like, I've got this, and Dave Blenner, G-Dad, is like, well, you know, what if I give you, he's like, I'll send you, he's like, I've got some, like, Nurgle, he's like, he's one of those people who, like, will admit himself that he sort of, like, perpetually cycles armies. You know, like, he'll just buy in, and then he buys the next army, and he kind of cycles in. He's sort of settled in on a couple now, he's got his Forever Home, but, like, that sort of second army's always out there, and he's always kind of chasing it, right? And so he's just like had a bunch of Nurgle stuff. He's like, got a Nurgle start collecting, feculent Narmals, a pair of those, some stuff off the sprue. I'm like, okay, yeah, this is a good. All right, that's better than my start collecting box. So I'll do like, yeah, I'll do. You know, people can get this and then get this. And I was talking to Brendan, and he's like, and he kind of kept it on the sneak, because he's like, well, I think we can help you out too. And it was around the time that like G-Dad sent me a couple things, and people started to hear that I was going to do a charity marathon, and the reason it became a charity marathon, combination of like literally, if I have a platform, I want it to mean something. Long after I've stopped recording RantCasts, and long after I've stopped doing anything on this earth, whatever great game or great beyond exists, whatever gaming table in the sky, or you know, I'm just compost, I don't know, but I'd like to think that, you know, there's that I leave something here, you know, in a sort of very esoteric sense. You know, Nagash has his 9 books. You know, if I write 9 fiction books and I you know, do something good, then I will have made more on this earth than, you know, not. And you know, I'm like, well, so I want to do something with the platform. I want to do this charity thing. But most importantly, I needed an excuse that Molly, my partner, would tolerate for me taking 27 hours off, plus another half a day of like
Recovery. Yeah.
recovery, and whatever other prep work was going to go into it. I had to have something worth it to her, and I'm like, if this is for charity, she can't tell me no. So it's, it's so like there's that all happened, but really, it was like a couple people like started like, can I donate this to your charity event? And can I donate this to your charity event? Travis Winter sent me a box via Atlas Games. Sent me a box. It had to be like 8 games. I mean, it was a full like my kids could build a fort out of it box just filled with games. He's like, here you go. And I'm like, am I supposed to like give this to like one person? Like, am I supposed to trickle it out as presents? Or he's like, do with it what you want, but I get the first slot. And I'm like, deal. Like, and then it was just people like just started, giving to this cause. I chose mental health because I've always had a platform of mental health visibility, which actually started in the RPG community. A couple RPG streamers I watched, Castle Mac being one of them, was had like a mental health visibility platform where like they would be open about, and the Castle Mac is like a kind of like a brand now, but they'd be open about their mental health day, having a bad mental health day on Twitter, or they say stuff like that. And there are people out there who they don't need to hear your mental health stuff; they'll just keep scrolling. But like the few people out there who are struggling with mental health, you're like, oh shit, like you see that post and you feel instantly better in your life. I'm like, well, I felt better coming out, and I'm like, I want to do that too. And so I started doing that in my just sort of random content and stuff like that, and I carried it into RantCasts. So I'm like, it has to be a mental health charity. But it was actually Bryce at Brew City, your own Bryce here on in the Basement of Death crew here. He at Brew City Brawl, that event I went to, did mental health Milwaukee or suicide Milwaukee, and I was just like, I mean, that's it. That's the missing piece, right? Like, is I know I want it to be something. I recognized I had my own mental health platform. I'm like, Mental Health America. Like, this is you. Then you do a charity rate tracker, or you do a charity. A couple you do some internet searches to make sure that you've got the best possible mental health charity you can find that has the widest reach, and it came together. And the next step was then getting guests. The 2-hour block format. I said I've been present online kind of an embarrassing amount of time, making content for how relatively small I am. I don't think I can really claim that anymore because I have raised over $20,000 for charity in 2 years. But it feels like you're never the big fish in the internet. You're always
sure. You don't have a million subscribers. Like you look at it. But what I will say is like the people coming together. I mean the guest spots. It was year one. We somehow we were convinced to do a reading of The Room. I don't know how that happened. But like other folks came on and talked games, mental health. Like you had the doctors of Warhammer, just a number of people, Dan and Brendan. This year you did the veterans like segment. There's a community of people that will engage and will talk and like come on, and late hours you had some Australian
coming
help
off the bench.
and,
yeah
to keep it going, and people like well, picking up, giving you a little bit of a break, like just like everyone coming out to be a part of it and help out, and kind of show the support was the coolest thing to see, and just watching the chat scroll, seeing people like ChatGang, the show within the show always, but like during the rantathon, it's like something special.
It's over.
I mean,
It's
you look through it and it's just like so many people dropping in and just seeing the donations pop up, and like it's just such a cool. I spent most of the time this year just watching, hanging out, talking in chat throughout the day. Like I told my family, I'm like, Andrew's doing his thing. I want to be a part of it. And I'm not on air talking with you, but I'm in chat, donating when things pop up. Like, you feel like you're a part of something. I think a lot of viewers, a lot of people that participated had that too, where they'd pop in, they'd give some words of encouragement, they'd make a donation, and then you'd see them 6 hours later after they did whatever they had to do. Like, it was just really cool experience.
Well, like I said, I've been around the internet for a while in various capacities. I used to work for Games Done Quick, via a subcontracting company. So what we did is we provided the practice rooms and the video game consoles where they would come and practice, and we'd help with some technical setup, but that was a different subcontractor. And I looked at my time working with them as how to set it up, the 2-hour blocks and having different guests block to block and so on and so forth, having the prize incentives. I really modeled that after them because they were successful. It's the most successful charity event I could think of. And I'm like, well, the Warhammer community is the best community I've ever been a part of. I've been a part of that speedrun community. I'm like, literally, these guys are better than that, and I can prove it empirically with the rantathon. No, it's the thing is we had the prize support we had for this last one. The first one was good, but the first one was good. The grand prize is a whole army. You had people coming on the show because nothing like it had really existed before in our community, and suddenly people were like, "Oh, I want to give this." And Vince just suddenly I'll paint someone a model, I'm just I'm like that's a freaking grand prize, right? That we have a second grand prize now, and that organic of it kind of coming together and not really knowing what we had as in that first year of what was happening. I'm like I had a chip on my shoulder to box of Beasts of Chaos, at the time probably a kind of maligned army, and I'm just and the people showing up, but what you said there was people were a part of something. It's people weren't just showing up for the prizes. Most people are I never win anything. I know I'm not going to win anything, but I'm a part of something right now. And then we have those donation incentives where it's just to let them know that this isn't just, because that's what it is the spectacle of the incentives is literally you're making stuff happen. And COVID's complicated me getting my tattoo, but I have an artist pinned down in Milwaukee. His name's Zach, does phenomenal sort of traditional Americana blended with Japanese style, and I'm like, who else should do my Nagash tattoo? COVID's complicated it. We've misfired a couple times on the schedule now. I was hoping to have it to show for Spooky Month, but we'll see. It's probably November, maybe December. We'll see. But okay. I'm not gonna volunteer a tattoo again, but and there was that part of me where how many people showed up just for the the Schadenfreude of watching me stay up for 24 hours and getting a tattoo. How many people just did it for that? And the second year it was kind of worrisome because I'm I don't have any big spectacle like this. I'm I'm not doing the full 27 hours like I did the first night. I made that up. I said that kind of up front on whatever various I didn't really advertise well, but if you watched my show or I happened on someone else's show, I'm I'm not doing the whole 27 hours. It's going to 36, but I'm taking a break overnight, type thing. And so you get a little bit more rantathon, but you get less Mephisto, and you don't have that spectacle of me staying up 24 hours, 27 hours. I'm like, are people still going to watch it this year? And we did $7,000 the first year. My target goal was 500 initially, and I doubled that to 1,000 for a tattoo when I think it was Brendan and Jacob Barry were like, well, how much would you get a tattoo for? And I thought, no, it was freaking Sean Benzor. Sean Benson on Twitter.
Sean Zor, yeah.
Yeah, Sean Zor. And he's like, well, how much for you to get a tattoo? And you got to keep in mind, I've streamed. At this point, I have streamed about 8 years, personally. I'm aware of how many people watch my show usually, week to week. At this point in time, RantCast has a lower metrics right now, as of this recording, than it did going into the first rantathon in 2020. More people watched and donated X dollars, blah de blah, to just me, and subscribed, and I looked at my little revenue tab in Twitch, and I said, this is how much I make in a month of streaming. I'm like, in 5 months of so I want to raise for charity 5 months worth of stuff I normally make, and that was like the $500. All right, and I'm like, and I did some math about like, well, if I get 20 people watching per hour, and I guess they each donate like $5, and I was just doing this math. I'm like, $1,000. That's how much I want to raise, or how much I want to think I can raise is 500. And then Sean did the thing. I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm not gonna get $500. 1,000, meaningless number, meaningless number.
Instant.
Yeah.
The first block, we had shattered $1,000, and I'm just like, Molly was pissed. She was pissed. She's like, you're getting, because I'm a man of my word. Like I am a very honest to a fault. I am not the friend you ask if you need him to lie to you that day about something. Like I'm not. You come to me when you need like the like stone cold truth of like to like reinvigorate you. I'm not the like I tell you white lies to like build you up guy. So Molly, having been with me 11 years at this point and 10 years at that point, was like, I don't say, and my kids are beginning to become aware to this. I don't say I promise or promise to do anything, because it was traumatic for my mom to constantly like make promises and break them. So I'm like, I'm never going to like promise something I can't deliver on. And so like, maybe it's a little like lawful neutral, I have to say the words I promise, but so I don't say promise, and my kids are now becoming aware of it. It was like, well, Dad doesn't promise, but if he does, he really does do it. And so they're like, do you promise? And I'm like, I can't promise that. I'm like, I can't promise that. And so when I got she's like, I look at Molly's like standing right over here, and I'm like, and she's like kind of watching that first hour, and she's just like, you fucking idiot. You idiot. She's like, you're gonna have to get a tattoo now. Like, and just like super mad at me. But then like we ended up at like $7,000 over the course of the whole event. Kernigat comments on all of our YouTube videos, ended up winning the OBR army, donated by Cubic Shenanigans. And I'm like, Molly, even if I had been smarter, I'd have set it at $5,000. And we still raised $7,000. So now you can't be mad at me. And she was like, fair.
Yeah.
Like, even if I was smarter about it. And so this year, like I went into it because I don't want to do that thing where it's just like infinite growth and always expecting more and always assuming it, because that feels too much like a business and a profiteering thing. And I'm like, this is people in this great community helping out for a great cause, seeing like, 36 hours of content, but being a part of something. Most importantly, for me, that's the most important part, is people being a part, having an excuse to like put it on the calendar and be like, this is when the Rantathon is next year. I'm going to show up because I'm going to see some shenanigans. Like, I'm going to see literally some of my favorite people across the community. Like, in one day, I'm going to look forward to that, like Vince block, or like Ian Just Play block, like whatever it is that they're looking forward to. The veterans. Go ahead.
And this year, Ian had, who is perhaps my favorite man in Warhammer,
the face
who
of
I
Warhammer.
didn't know was my favorite man in Warhammer, Tom. My destruction, my Destro bro. And I was like, this dude is like, if I lived in England and I played games, I feel like Tom would be my best friend. And I don't know the guy, he has no idea who I am, but I connected with him through Rantathon, just listening to him talk. I was like, I love this guy.
We talked about full English breakfast.
Yeah.
For like,
that's what, dude, look at me. I love food. I love English breakfast.
I'm like, do you still call it an English breakfast in England? Like the dumb question, right? And that's the thing about like some of these like community members, is you get to meet them at tournaments. If because I make it a point, like I'm of the mind that you dance with who you go to prom with, right? RantCast became RantCast because I wasn't just interviewing like the AOS coaches and the Doom and Darkness and the Vince Venturellas of the world. It was because I was ChatGang is the show within the show, and I would I talk to my friends, I'd talk to anybody, and so like Rantathon has blocks where it's just like people from chat in it. Like we had the veterans block. I know Dan was in there. It was supposed to be a few more people, but they just couldn't make it. It was like we had the chat gang. Always will have the chat gang block where anybody from chat gang can pop in, and we'll do like a hobby hangout. But the thing is that like most of the content creators that I get on, because you still gotta have the big names. Like I don't want to be cynical, but you still gotta have like the big acts, right? Like you gotta have that stuff. You want the community.
Sure, yeah.
You gotta have all that stuff. But that's the thing is you want all that stuff. A little something for everyone, right? But like the thing is yeah, Vince does a live show. But he does a very structured live show.
Yeah.
Like he has a PowerPoint and he doesn't necessarily have, he has show notes, but they're kind of loose. I've been on like 4 times. I've seen them once. You get to see like these people in the community that you only ever really interact with through either their show or their content or from a tabletop perspective, kind of like let their hair down and like hang out and talk about Warhammer. Sometimes you get like these like stories about other people's mental health that you just didn't know. And that's the thing is like mental health as a cause is universal. You don't have to have, like be neurodivergent or have like a condition to just have a bad mental health day. It's like spraining your ankle, right? Like anybody can like sprain their ankle or just catch a cold. Like you don't have to. It's universal. We all have something. And I think 2020 especially put it into like sharp focus just how important mental health was for everyone. So it just was, I mean, Rantathon, the first one, was just a perfect storm. It really was of, my own sort of like snarky sense of humor and a little dash of spite, just like H Bomber guys own charity marathon, and like just a little dash. Spite's a good motivator, okay? Like to do something grandiose.
Spite is, and it turned into that happy accident, right? Like,
yeah,
Bob Ross,
Mhm.
in action. So real quick before before I change course on you, I do want to talk about, has there been any thoughts or plans for Rantathon 3, the re-ranting or the re-ranting of Rantathon 3?
So 2 things. Rantathon 3 is, so when I finished with the Rantathon, I just like it gets out of my mind for a little bit. Like any good campaign you run in D&D, if you tournaments, you have that moment where you savor it, you go yes, but then you have a moment where you got to go okay, diffuse,
Let it go, decompress.
Yep.
Palate cleanse. Yeah.
That's what October is for me. Is like October is like just for me. That's why the 31 horror movies. I'm like, this is just for me. No expectations. I'm not raising money. I don't giveaways. Like none of that. Like I just do the horror stuff because it's fun, and that's where like I kind of decompress. And
I'll come back to this question November 1st. I'll be like, yo.
No.
I gave you October.
I told you all this to tell you that I've already had thoughts though. Is like they're invading my me time now because I can't not think about it. Because that first year, a happy accident. That second year, this is what we can do when we think about it, and like things don't break the right way, but we still like we've had time to know. We kind of know what we've got here, and so we can like actually like try to make that better and tinker just a little bit. And next year, like it's like I know where I want to focus more. And the main one is like the international community, just not in like any big grandiose way. It's still going to be Mental Health America in theory, unless like literally some like grassroots, highly rated charity comes at me and they're like, "Yo, Meph, we saw what you did with this, and like we're willing to like, help you do this and make it even huger, and you're still raising money for mental health, but like also here's $1 million. Like, okay, maybe yeah, fine. I can be bought, is what I'm saying. Like, I'm not that much. No, it should be Mental Health America still. But like when I had Ian and Richie, when I had Ian and Tom on, I sent some money out of my personal accounts. I like did like a little bit of a charity matching thing, and I sent some to the Autism Society in Australia, and I had a couple different Australian guests on, so I sent some to the Black Dog Foundation, which is a mental health charity. Now, I'm not saying like price matching and stuff like, because that feels like too businessy, and I'm not doing this for business, but some sort of like camaraderie or because that's the Age of Sigmar community is international. I have bonds with people in Australia and the UK and freaking Sweden, and like just a couple people in Japan I've been talking to recently. I have like bonds I've built with tons of people across the Age of Sigmar community, and I want to figure out some way to like integrate that a little bit more. If there's some way to just give a little bit of juice to their local mental health causes, or just something like that. Like
Worldwide rantathon.
Yeah, like something just to like if it is something as simple as I had somebody reach out to me from Tennessee and be like, how do I saw Rantathon, how do I like I have my own ideas for like doing something, community focused and charity based, and he's like, how do I do that? And I'm like, nah. I'm not equipped for that, but I can tell you what I did.
Little Mess Charity Achievers Program.
Yeah, like I don't know, like just something where like there's some way to like help people. If it's just broadcasting the local suicide hotline numbers a little bit more and a little bit better for people, like if it's just being able to give people resources to their local areas, like check my analytics, see who watched from where, and be like, okay, make sure that these demographics have like some resources that I talk about, even if it's like a little, maybe it'll be a little hammy telethon-y to like every couple hours or every few hours be like, here's the block where I mentioned this stuff, and something like that is in the future. The other is we're thinking, we kicked around the idea of a physical venue this year, not to make it like a tournament or like a Gen Con or anything like that, but just like a place where physically some of the guests can make it, and we have like a place where it's being recorded and interviewed to like
Rant House.
Yes, Rant House. Where we have like a physical venue, because that would also offload some of the like the burden of me doing all of it and micromanaging it all from my little 3 monitors here. Because if I'm less focused on like doing the giveaways every hour or every 2 hours on the hour, and updating the spreadsheets, and
if you do a Rant House, next year, I will convince Brendan to do the Skyfire tire swing, and we'll make sure that happens.
But that's the thing, is like that becomes incentive territory now. That spectacle aspect, if I've got like a physical venue,
we'll do flaming arrows.
Yeah, I can have Brendan dodge a fire arrow.
Yeah,
you're looking live on the tire swing.
Yeah, like cut to the tire swing cam.
We'll cover the tire swing with like, one of those saucer sleds, so it actually looks like
nice
a disc of Zinch, and we'll spray paint it. Yeah,
you gotta wear the beak though.
I haven't talked to Vince about this yet, but I do think that there's a little bit of that, like, if it's not broke, don't fix it going on in my mind. I'm like, where does the not broke, don't fix it, but also want to make it the best it possibly can be? Like, where is that line? And one of it is like, what if I get Vince to, instead of doing the Vince block, have like a painting seminar? So like there's like a 2-hour like Vince paint seminar, or maybe it's a 1 hour and 20 minutes or something like that, where he does like a painting seminar, but then you also still get to see Vince with his hair down, metaphorically speaking.
Yeah.
Like what would that look like? Would people have an interest in something like that? Because now you get this like
behind the apron.
Yeah, behind the apron. So it's just like, what guests can I bring on to maximize it? I want to bring the veterans block and the doctors block. They're locks. They gotta come back on. But I want the veterans block to come back on, because there's that moment where like Dave and Dan were talking about their shared experience, and like kind of how like the dynamics of being a veteran and mental health awareness, and they called it, like in World War II, they called it a shell shock, right? They didn't know what PTSD was yet. you have in the gamer communities abroad, and I think especially in Warhammer because you kind of get a 1-2 punch. In gaming abroad, you're essentially like a highly weighted demographic of socially marginalized peoples. Whether it's your like nerds who just didn't quite fit in school or actual like social minorities, but there's a higher representation of just socially marginalized individuals in gaming. In wargaming, you get the socially marginalized individuals, but then you also get veterans. These are two demographics that are hit higher for sort of like clinical mental health issues than just like what we talked about, like the sort of cold equivalent of a mental health, bad mental health day. And so you have these like two demographics that are like heavily weighted in our community, and veterans having a voice in that. Your podcast doesn't go in this territory. I'm a dirty lefty, but I come from a long line of like military veterans, and I'm basically a military brat. I grew up off of Camp Lejeune military base. I do not undervalue the men, women of the armed forces in this, or any country for that matter. Talk to hobby hobo from either New Zealand or Australia. It's the same country to me.
Oh boy. Oh
he has
boy.
I
lost
know, I'm
us.
getting shots fired.
That was
like
Andrew, I believe.
At
That was
Mr.
not
underscore
one-
Meph.
at Mr. underscore Meph, tell me that New Zealand really exists.
So Rantathon, I think we just ranted about Rantathon, which is great. I know that one of the things that we'll certainly do whenever Rantathon 3, the re-ranting appears, is share it to the moon. As small as our voice or platform may be, we 100% support what you do there, and look forward to future Rantathons, because it's not just one more, it's many. So we will be there backing you all the way. But I think what would be next up, and what we really should do, is get deep into what you and I have affectionately coined the forever GM syndrome.
One real quick thing before we go there, I got to ask you guys, what do you want from Rantathon 2022? What is the basement of death? Because I felt I didn't do I did a Wisco segment in the first year where I had like just all the Wisconsin podcasts, and for one reason or another, I couldn't get all of them lined up again. And just, what do you want? What does the basement of death want from Rantathon 20? What does your audience want? Respond in the comments below on YouTube.com.
Yes.
Engagement. Feed the engagement. Let's go.
I think the BOD should just be on hook for getting you a sketch. We'll get you a little like video clip to play. We won't do like an hour or 2 hour segment, but we will give you a few spots if you need filler, like a 5 minute.
I could do like
40K
type
40K translator sketch, or like Coop's dirty 3D printing, where he just says 3D printer terms that sound real dirty into a microphone.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. So we'll give you some content to just sprinkle.
I gotta write this down.
Like a fine seasoning
Your
blend
extruder
over
is
the
clogged.
Oops. Dirty 3D printing. I'm not gonna remember what that means in like a year, but
we'll remind you.
Yeah,
I love your hot end.
like, I mean, you see, I mean, that's incentive fodder right there. If you want to watch some Basement of Death sketches, hit $1,000, $2,000, like, and I can just run the clip live, and then I can actually like go and like cry in the corner at all the stress I'm under, and like.
Yeah, I'll do 2 minutes of late night radio.
Oh, it's so good.
Troy will do 40K translator, and Josh will do dirty 3D printing, and Bryce will just do like corgi play.
Yeah. Oh, I did have Bryce on that first block because I wanted some BOD representation.
Oh, that's right. He was a cat with you and Brendan.
Yeah, we did the cat thing, and I still managed to get Paul, and I still managed from Mortal Realms, and I still managed to get Dan from. Yeah.
But we'll for sure contribute that.
I got to
It'll
get
be
Kenny
a-
on there next year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Black Library. Combat
So-
phase.
All right.
All right.
Forever GMing.
Yeah, forever GMing. So we've talked about this concept, and I think I've been thinking about it as we led up to this show, and the notes I put down were, why do we embrace it so much and just like go so hard in the paint for GMing? Is it because we're just enablers of fun and we want to give access to people,
I like how charitable you're
or
being to yourself. Yeah.
or is it gluttons for punishment? We want to punish ourselves, and like this is our, the flagellants, right? Like
Yep.
this is us doing that, and that's why we run 3 campaigns at a time through a pandemic, or that's why we pick up a rule book and say, "Hey guys, come play this game." But
I can run this.
what is it that gets to the core of why some of us are forever GMs? And then I've got a follow up to that about what happens when we actually get a chance to play, because
Well-
that's like a science experiment gone wrong.
Right. Well, see, I mean, the truth of it is we're just better people than the rest of them.
That's fair. That's fair.
No.
Yeah, we're far superior people.
Sure.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was
no,
gonna make
I-
a nice comment, but maybe I'll hold it now. So that's
No, I think there's a few flavors of the Forever GM. I don't think there's. I know what flavor I am. I'll maybe elaborate on that later. People can like figure that out. But I think there's a few flavors of Forever GM. I think there is the begrudging Forever GM, where they really are the only one in their group of players who will run a game. Nobody else wants the responsibility. They're the only one with a slight inkling of either ability to run a game, has run a game, or willingness to run a game. Right? Like they just there's some combination of just enough of like the only way I get to play in an RPG is behind the GM screen. And I think that there are some forever GMs out there that is them. Now, we're entering a era of the most access to RPGs that has ever existed. The internet, Discord, like RPGs and stuff like that, like it's so much easier to be able to get a game now. A little bit of Russian roulette with that, but the access is there. What has happened with that breed of Forever GM is they're reluctant to give up the power they've become accustomed to, which I think is an interesting phenomenon. Like they've always secretly resented being the Forever GM, but they also don't want to not GM now because I think those are the ones that you have the most problems with on both sides of the table, as a GM and as a player when they become a player, because they have that chip on their shoulder when they start to play and they have this like vendetta. they become very adversarial. But I do think a more benevolent form of Forever GM is the GM out there who genuinely wants to GM. They want to tell the stories or curate the stories or facilitate the fun.
I call them the fun. It's fun creation, right? Ultimately, you have two kinds of people, Andrew, in this world. You have your fun creators and your fun destroyers. You're either actively seeking fun and fun activities, building it for others, or you're destroying fun in some manner. Be it
most of them are in
no.
MTG right now.
They are playing ridiculous rogue, Demir rogue decks that just make you
no fun allowed. Yeah,
top deck. Yeah, no fun destroyers. But that's a working theory I have, is the fun creators and the fun destroyers. There might be a middle ground of fun seekers that are like, I want to go find where the fun's at. I'll play a game, but they're not like instilling fun. So that's kind of, I think, where you're on with that type of persona that like generally enjoys it, wants to facilitate. I think that's a great word for what a good GM does.
Yeah, I think good GMs have a good story and know the rules decently enough. Like you don't need a perfect understanding or recollection of the rules. You just got to know them well enough to keep the chains moving, and for nobody to ever question you in a disruptive manner. Like. Yeah. There's a couple ways to get around this, by the way. If people know that you're the GM that doesn't give a crap about the rules, they won't question your rules, by the way. like this weird like thing that happens where like GMs have to be the most polished person on the rules is like just the biggest farce in the world.
Yeah.
They need a functional understanding to keep the game moving. But like the GMs who care the least about the rules have the least rules arguments at their table too, because that one beautiful moment happens where the rules lawyer runs into a GM who like just looks at them with this just like almost like this parental face and is like, I don't care. Like the game just keeps moving, and those rules lawyery types usually learn pretty early on that this just isn't the game for that, and then they discover their RP heart, and it's a redemption arc. Not that I dislike rules lawyers, by the way. We'll get to that later, I'm sure. No, I think there's there's a sort of the great GMs though are the ones that realize it's not about them. Like a GM who wants to tell a story but realizes it's not about them is the best GM you will ever have. They have this like great idea or just this like one joke they want to make. Like the whole thing, like what is it? Like Pacific Rim. The whole thing is just one pun leading up to the Jaeger bomb, right? Like you have a GM out there who's running this like this Cthulhian, you know, horror story with like mechs versus kaiju, and like it's more actiony because they gotta have the action elements there to lead into the punchline of they just wanted to make a Jaeger bomb joke. They were hanging out with their friend one night and they're just like, Jaeger bomb. Wait, Jaeger means warrior, and like I love mechs, and there's mechs warriors, and then suddenly they just have this whole campaign they want to run now because
Look
they
out
have
for it, guys. My next campaign is just going to be one big Jaeger bomb joke.
right, and you have those GMs, and that type of GM is like, as long as I get to make my joke,
I just want my one joke.
everything's in bounds. Like as long as we get to make the joke, you know, like so there's this like this I don't want to like call it a selfless GM, but just a GM that realizes that a game master is a player at the table too. Like there's not GM versus players or GMs and players. You're all flipping players.
Yeah.
You know,
There's a cleric in the party, there's a bard, and there's a GM. Like you're truly just when you think about the GM's contribution of every single like other person in the world, and like you know narrative arc, and you use what your players have, but like the GM is like the.
I'll tell you right now, one of the best games I've ever run. My friend Sam, who comes up a lot. He's just my friend Sam and everything because he doesn't have an online presence whatsoever. He's just not his thing, but he's referenced constantly by both me and Haywo. And he is my oldest friend in the world, with Haywo being my second oldest friend in the world. And Sam has known me longer, physically longer, in totality, longer than anybody else I've ever met, including relatives, because they're all wishy-washy. And the best game I've ever run was a game, it was just trading between us three who was GMing that week. And so we all had our player characters that we made in what we call middle school riffs, which is riffs, Palladium books. And we made like just the dumbest characters, the most murder hobo thing you could think of, with the most absurd abuses, because we've all GM'd riffs at any given point in time, and we all have played with each other at any given point in time. And so you just have like three veteran GMs. I'm the three, I'm the forever GM, by the way, if you didn't know. But we've all GM'd. Sam was my GM when I was growing up, in fact. Like that's like he's the guy who GM'd me, and then eventually I just like was the guy who wanted to run more than him, or or had more time to prepare than him at some point in high school. And then we ran this game where like we all just made our player characters, the three of them, and then just like week to week we trade off who was GMing, and we did kind of like a monster of the week like thing. So like your PC became your DM PC or your GM PC, and we were just like rotating around, and there was no like chicanery, like adversarial GM thing. Like you'd still try to like outdo each other. So like a mini game happened where us as GMs would try to make the more insane bad guy for the rest. But you're invested in your like own DMPC, so you don't want to die. But like you make but your DMPC kind of goes into like the. I don't know if you. I don't know the other GMs in the audience are here, but like my DMPCs and most of my like passive NPCs who are like equipped to the party for like the long adventures, they essentially go into like a sort of passive mode where they really are just they're there. They might have like a couple lines of dialogue, but they don't really say anything unless the party like addresses them or tries to include them in the scene. Where they're like, "Oh, well, what's this person doing right now?" And then like, and then I'll like say what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because I don't ever want to like take the spotlight off of my party. And so my DMPC, like I do like to make a sweet DMPC. Don't get me wrong. I think people are wrong on the internet about like DMPCs and how bad they are. They're wrong. They're just using them wrong. So don't get me wrong. I do want to make my Mary Sue insert. Like I'm gonna do it. Like, it's just the spotlight's never on it. Like, so it's fine. It's a safety net for them. So like we were all of our PCs were PCs and DMPCs. So like we have stakes to not like obliterate the party. And it wasn't about like killing the party because you're a part of the party. It was about just like showing off how clever and how sweet the encounter you made was. And the RP was like constant because we were just like in this mode of like sort of self-referencing and self-mocking how we used to play the game when we were growing up. And it lasted like, I don't know, like 3 or 4 months. But it was just absurdly excellent. It was I'm not one to say trade-off GMs often because the preparation, the logistics, it was unsustainable. We couldn't keep running. We couldn't run a whole campaign that way.
Yeah.
Because you just have the week where the next person up couldn't run it, and
yeah.
But
things fall apart with the greatest enemy of any RPG campaign, and that's scheduling.
Right. The true boss at the end.
Right. That is, yeah. Actually, any like level 20 campaign just faces a calendar as their final encounter. That's what I've decided. So with that, forever GMing. First, I want to include Josh and Troy. I want to give them a chance because I don't know that either of them are forever GMs by any means. But any commentary? I know Troy, you were probably holding a comment for a while there.
And yeah, so I was. What's funny, and I don't. This is interesting. I think Meph kind of mentioned it. Like I was the forever GM until I ran into Ty, because then he kind of trumped my. I hadn't played for a long time, but when I had played before, it was always because I was the DM, and then I stopped kind of DMing, and so I didn't play for a decade or more, right? And then I found another 4-hour DM, so I could actually play, right? And that, so I think I think that you have to find that your goal is you have to find somebody else who's more into being a forever DM than you are, and then that gives you the ability to actually play.
Before you can pass the torch and say, yes, consume my flame. Well, I will let you become stronger.
So why were your group's forever DM?
Well, one, it was mostly I was playing with family and friends, like my brothers and I growing up. We played a lot with friends, and it was just ended up being I was the one, right? And partly it was partly I wanted to tell the story, right? There's a story I wanted to tell, and it was interesting. You guys mentioned. I think there was a maturity in my DMing when I was in high school, college. It was a little bit. It's like it goes from that me-centric, like I have the story I want to tell with these people, to then all of a sudden you kind of flip it and you realize no, like you guys were saying, like no, this is a cooperative. Like I'm actually part of this. I'm trying to enable fun and adventure for everybody here. There's that kind of mindset, and I think RPGs have actually matured in that manner. In that, it took me 10 years, I think, to learn that lesson. Whereas nowadays, I think out of the box, people are talking about it, or RPG, right? There's much more. It's much more evident around people acknowledging the fact that you're not, the DM is part of that and trying to enable fun, and not just trying to jam their view down whoever's sitting at the table, right? Those people don't last long anymore.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think even like Gary Gygax was more adversarial than we like to think. Like St. Gygax, Wisconsin's own. Like he was a more adversarial, GM, and like I still have that like that place in my mind where like the never meet your heroes, and I understand like there's some personal life stuff that would probably like make me cringe, but still, like, it's still Saint Gygax to me. This just enshrined in my mind, like figment of whoever the real person probably was, because I only learned him through the texts and the little like Cliff's notes essentially of like his modules and those original ones. And I remember, one of my absolute favorite modules. I can't even remember which one it was. It was, but I remember there's this point where they're essentially you're in an Illithid ship, right? That has like crashed, so you think you're in a cave, and there's this sequence where you're like going through the dungeon, and it's the old school dungeon, like every trap is gonna kill you, so you have to find them all, like just this brutal, like the dungeon crawl old school era. And there's this sequence where you get into a room, and I think the big bad evil guy's in it, and there's like the descriptions told to you of everything, and there's this like very Gary Gygax description of this pedestal, this altar, and just this all this like flowery language. It's a freaking laser turret. It's like a Gatling gun of lasers, and like the language all around it is just like kind of like flowery, evasive, like you're actually in a sci-fi game and not a fantasy game. Like, and just remembering that and just going and like giggling about that and like wanting to like do that a little bit with my players. But when my players realized the joke, wanted to be able to laugh with them rather than like laugh at the fact that I was so clever they didn't know it was a laser gun at the beginning. Like, for me, that was the switch that flipped. Is wanting to be able to like laugh with my players when like the cool thing happens, or wanting to be able to cheer when like the awesome thing happens, or when like I do like drama in my RPGs, and you can't get to drama without conflict, and conflict has all sorts of like outliers, right? Of things that happen. But that moment where like you have this character that like just like had that moment that just rocked their character, and their players sitting there, and they're just like, I need a minute, dude. And they like walk away from the table or something, and like they come back, and you're just like, I know, I had the fucking moment too. I was hoping this was this good. But like, to get them there, they got to trust you.
Yeah.
And you don't get trust at the table by being an adversarial, selfish D-bag. Like, I think for me that really is the secret sauce to GMing, is it's the trust component around the thing. It's where thinking your players are going to try to angle shoot you on a rule, you don't have trust already. And being on both sides of the screen helped me. I started initially on the player side of the screen, young. Like, because first I didn't know what the hell Dungeons and Dragons was. My friend's older brother got one of the like second ed starter boxes, with the paper unfoldable map, and like playing an elf. I think elf was literally elf class, and I don't even remember the game. I don't remember anything. I just remember playing an elf, and it was cool being an elf. And then I remember with my friend who had played with his older brother, because he just wanted to run it. He just got this new toy. He just wants to run it. And so it was like two kids way too young to be playing an RPG. I think it was like 4th or 5th grade. No idea, right? And then like the older brother who was like the cool middle schooler in like 6th or 7th grade, and then a couple of his friends, and then we were playing. And I remember finishing playing with him, and then going out into the backyard where we normally played Ninja Turtles, and we normally played like like pretending to like we're fighting the Foot Clan and stuff, and then like suddenly being like, no, we're in a dungeon, and then like me describing, no, you were in here, and like having this like sort of like LARP session where I was like telling the other, it's make believe, right? This like sort of like collective make believe we're all like participating in, and we have a framework of rules to give it some stakes, and to give it that element of fate and chance. But like, you're playing make believe with your friends. It's the best. It's the best.
Yeah, I think you touched on something there, the stakes, right? And like there's got to be trust, and there's got to be something at stake. I'm never the type of GM to like try to design an encounter that's going to kill my party. But I want my party at all times to think that there's a very real possibility they could die, if that makes sense, right? Like, it's not going to be beat your face in, like, you can't win this. I want there to be that sense of this could go south, like a healthy amount of fear and apprehension that whatever's through that next door is going to be something that can kill many of them. And like I've tinkered with like the death rules in a campaign so that like cuz death in D&D, right, is like a
Doesn't
temporary
matter.
status.
Meaningless. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
meaningless.
it's a
setback.
status. Yeah, like a condition, right? Um, and you can clear it with a simple spell. So like I've played with those mechanics so that like people are Josh, I think it happened to you, right? Like your character um in the Sundering campaign, you were positioned with that like this is your final chance. You can come back from here. The next time you die, it is final. Kind of that discussion with the deity of like you're on your last life. So
Yeah.
like creating that apprehension, that tension, that stake where now Coop's character is quite literally and figuratively on death's door. Like he knows that the next time his number is drawn, it's for real. So like I think it creates a scenario where Josh is having some anxiety and tension, and I'm not gonna overtly come and stab him in the back and like kill him. I'm gonna let it happen organically. Like if he does something that is it's worthy of death, but like
it adds a little something, right? It adds a little spice. It's
The spice, yeah.
yeah. It's for sure. It adds that element of awesome.
Oh,
Yeah.
like my friend Sam, he's he really was my mentor, and again, it's really funny because I've gone on to become the forever GM, and I've GM'd him more times than he's ever GM'd me at this point. In 36 years versus when I met him in 6th grade, and we just happen to have this RPG thing in common, and now we're like forever friends, right? He said something, and when we were young, like there's no like real weight behind it. It's just something like he heard said somewhere else. And he's like, I'll never kill a player. The player will, or I'll never kill a character. The player will kill the character. Like he said that, and I just like that got up in here, just deep in this cerebellum or wherever this memory is stored. That I will never kill a play, I will never kill a player character. The player will kill the character, and like you get a run of bad dice, but you have to be in a situation to where the run of bad dice will kill you, and you have to be in a mindset that there isn't other non-encounter ways to deal with the situation. Because you can always be like, fuck this, I'm going out the door. Like, nobody in an RPG ever wants to run away from anything ever, by the way. And every GM in the world, spoiler alert, none of your players want to run away from the big sweet guy that you just described to them. They think they can fight it. So, like, stop being a bag about that. Every player in the universe has been conditioned for...
We are heroes. We will fight and we will be victorious.
It's not even that. Mario told you to run right. The princess is in another castle. You're going to keep going forward to progress the game state. You have to give them better clues than, well, you can always run away. You got to let them know that this is the runaway fight via other storytelling techniques.
The 4 horses that were left in the stable outside of the big bad guys.
Sure, yeah, some sort of telegraph to like this is the runaway fight. A moment of dialogue where the boss like starts toying with them, like you fools, you can't win, but also, I've got a nail appointment later. Like whatever it is, you got to have something to where the party recognizes that like this is the runaway encounter. Or stop using them, and you're like, well, the party can always run away, and they just keep TPKing, and I have no idea why. No idea why, really. Like maybe it's just 100 years of board games conditioning people to move towards the forward progress of the game, like the inertia of continuing through doing stuff. Like it's anathema to like how people even conceptualize a game, because I love to think about games in terms of like narrative first and story and the story and the story, and like the combat and the dice and the rules are all affect. They're all just like the flavor. They're all just like the framework, the box I work within, and the worthier part is the whatever is facilitating people's interactions and the types of interactions I want people to have. Dungeons and Dragons that is sort of everyone's shorthand for talking about RPGs right now, is the framework of an encounter system. People don't think of it as a don't fight the stuff. For a long time, you only got experience for fighting the stuff. People have been conditioned to fight. You show a Balrog against your level 6 party, unless they know it's a Balrog, and depending on how you've described the situation, they're going to think that there's some work. It's an illusion. There's a puzzle piece somewhere. There's a button they can hit. They're always going to think there's a way to solve the situation. By the way, that's what causes some really great tension, by the way. Because if your stakes aren't you're going to die, I'm going to ruin a village, I'm going to kill one of your backstory characters, the stakes are something that you matter to the PC, but something that matters to the player, your loot. I'm going to take your freaking loot.
I'll never kill a player, Andrew, but I will certainly kill every NPC friend they made along the way.
Oh yeah, whatever the stakes. But that's the thing, is you got to recognize the stakes between the character and the player. Yeah. What are the stakes for a person who's I've had players who have wanted their character to die so they can roll a new one, and we just have I call him the Derek, and not as the Good Place reference, even though super righteous, but I had a player who just anytime a new book would come out or a new splat book or whatever, he'd see a new class and the new thing,
hotness,
and he'd want to suicide his character and make a new one. The stakes for that player are never going to be character death. They're going to be loot, oftentimes, because he's going to hope somebody in the party keeps his loot and gives it to him, keeps his money. They're going to be usually some sort of backstory hook or campaign stake or investment or something. That's the thing you have to threaten. It's not the PC death. It's the stakes are, for me, it's not. I want the world to feel lived in and real, so that means death has to be a part of the ecosystem.
Right.
But the stakes aren't always player death, is I guess all I'm saying. A really long way of saying you got to identify the stakes for your players, not just the player characters. What are the stakes for your players? If I literally don't care, I'm just character dies, whatever. You got to find a way to make me care that the characters died. Or that all I really care about in this scene right now is taking that dagger from that dude over there who is he's been kind of a douchebag this whole time in this scene, and it's as a GM it's a total throwaway character. I had no plans for Dagger Man being an issue. I just said something to one player once,
offended him once,
when they were playing cards, and I described him as carrying it, cleaning his fingernails with his dagger or something.
The villain was born.
The player just fixated on it. Do you know what Daggerman's gonna do? He's gonna get away, and Daggerman is gonna get a whole backstory now in between the sessions because I found the player's stakes. They really hate Daggerman. Guess who's suddenly part of the crime syndicate you're investigating? That wasn't before, but now he is.
Daggerman.
Daggerman. Yeah.
Funny, his original name was Daggerman #2 because there was a couple of them in there. He just leapfrogged Daggerman 1.
In the script, he was just an extra cleaning his fingernails with the dagger in the background, and then it becomes it takes but so that brings me to I think a GM point that I don't know how often I have adjusted on the fly because one of my players gets interested in something in the scene, in the in the dialogue, in whatever, and chases it it becomes their hook, and it's not one of the 15 hooks I wrote down in a notebook to place clues and things that happen. But I love running with that because that to me is maybe why I'm a forever GM is because I like seeing where the story goes. I like seeing where the plot develops, what's interesting, what gets exciting. So Troy sees something so we're playing Rime of the Frost Maiden, and I use these books, I use these modules really as just a framework, and then probably 80% of what happens is character driven or outside of like what Wizards of the Coast gives me in the book, right? It's like they get interested in something, like we did Descent to Avernus, and my brother really wanted to become like making deals with devils, and like there's a mechanic for it, and then but he's like, we had a sidebar discussion for like an hour one night. He's like, yo, we're gonna go into this conflict. Can I be a Lord of Hell? And I was like, you want to be one of the Lords of Hell? And he said, yeah, I want my character to like make a deal, protect the party, and then have to take over in Avernus if like we're successful. And I was like, I can work with this. Yeah, like I can work with this.
Yeah.
But it's like character driven, you know, like player driven. I love that. And I like then seeing where it goes, like Troy and his owls.
Like the cheat code is, and you got to explain the owls to me real quick. After this, the cheat code is, by the way, Daggerman or whatever random hook. And here it is. I'm gonna all you forever GMs out there maligning your party for not being as clever as you are and not catching all your clues and your subtleties and you yada yada yada. You know, Daggerman can have that like card from the poker game the party was supposed to recognize with the red pips instead of black pips, or like they've got the bottle of the MacGuffin that was just so important, or they were the court assassin that the party was looking for earlier but didn't find because they didn't do the puzzle game that you thought they should do the way you thought they should do it. You can always get the party back onto the thing that they should do, but like always lie about it. Never tell them that they didn't figure it out on their own. like always lie. As a GM, part of facilitating fun, this goes anathema to like how like brutally honest I am in reality. As a GM, I'm a liar. You can't trust me. But that's like, like the thing is like you want the players' stakes. Players and characters, like I'm using them a little interchangeably, but I'm very pointedly talking about players versus characters. Characters have their own set of goals and ambitions. Players have their own set of goals and ambitions. Many players, it's very similar, but every now and then you get those moments where the player ambition isn't the same as the character ambition, and you can watch in real time. Your players give you clues at the table which one they're favoring, and it can switch day to day. Sometimes they're like leaning more into their character than their player ambition. Player ambition might be to get XP and have some treasure, but they end up on a particular part of the narrative, and like right now they just really hate Daggerman. They're not even thinking about the dagger as loot, like I'm gonna get that dagger, I'm gonna smelt it. Well, that's where you can play with their own conflict, right? Because normally they want the loot and the XP. Well, now smelting the dagger is the goal. And you can even entice them a little bit. You'd be like, "Oh no, this is the secret metal dagger. If it gets melted into a key, that's like kind of a really big deal." And so now Daggerman's dead, but the dagger's gone, and because they got their like spite, but they didn't like get the full spite. Now you have the tension of them like needing the dagger to become the key thing, that the MacGuffin that they wanted.
You must get the dagger from Daggerman's corpse, which has now been burned and left in a barrow far to the west.
And that's where the conflict and the expectations.
So here's what we're gonna do, Andrew. We're gonna write a Daggerman adventure. We're gonna co-write a Daggerman adventure, and we're gonna put players through it, and it's gonna be this like.
It's just MacGuffin after MacGuffin and perversion.
It's just this constant loop of red herrings, and we're just gonna call it the Daggerman Chronicles. And it's not even gonna be Chronicles. It's gonna be a chronicle. It's gonna be like a story.
I've run the same. So for Gen Con, to get in free at Gen Con when they're still in Milwaukee, and I was a youngin', right? I would GM games. I had GM Drift because, especially in the 90s and the early 2000s, it had some buzz about it. They hadn't had their big embezzlement thing, and some media lost a bunch of money. So there's some buzz about it, but nobody really ran it because D&D or Vampire in Wisconsin, I don't know.
Vampire was real big.
I don't know. Yeah, were you? But I was in sort of like western Wisconsin around La Crosse, Winona, Minnesota, Green Bay. Vampire had like a presence in all those areas. And then obviously D&D, but I loved Rifts, and so I'd run like Rifts modules. I ran the same Rifts module. I always a train heist. There's a ley line train. I don't know if people know about Rifts. if your audience knows about rifts, but there's like literal like rivers of magical energy. Ley lines, it's a standard sort of new age, with older implications in our reality. And rifts just goes, yeah, ley lines are real, rivers of like magic energy, whatever. And so there's like ley line trains that like navigate these ley lines, and you like get on them. So I'm like, train heists are sweet, but what if it's a ley line train instead? And that just my like 14-year-old like master stroke genius moment. So to get into Gen Con for free, I'd run this adventure, and I'd show up with 20 pre-con characters, just a mid of 20 pre-con characters.
20.
Yeah, 20. I wanted a plethora. So
A
like I had
forever GM, ladies and gentlemen, a forever GM.
I had a Leyline
14-year-old
Walker.
Andrew.
Yeah, I had a Leyline Walker. Oh, dude, I'm way lazier now than I was when I was younger, by the way. I write like 3 notes in a journal now for my GMs or for my adventures. Like I've got like, I want this.
I'm lucky
and
if
that.
I write down like anything these days.
I put a lot more work into the characters of the world than the scenario or the adventure. Because if the character in the scene is fleshed out, then the scene becomes fleshed out, because everything becomes sort of like backfill from the character that matters in the scene.
Except for Daggerman.
Except for Daggerman. Well, no, even now Daggerman. Like I'm talking about Daggerman, and like, well, now it's a poker game, because like I'm picking up on the vibes of my party, and like I get that like maybe Troy really likes like deck building games, so it's gonna be it's got to be deck based in my world. It's got to be
like deck building.
It's got to be deck. And Coop, I get the sense that Coop wants to like drink, so there's like a strong dude over in the corner who's like having a drinking contest, and nobody's bested. Nobody has bested Bolgar the Relentless in 20 drinking sessions. Okay, he's undefeated, and so I'm just like picking up on what the party, and like Daggerman, I'm gonna pick something antagonistic for somebody, because I'm gonna get somebody to like care. And I'm just gonna build the scene out from as right now Daggerman, right? And so Daggerman's doing the card thing, and so I'm kind of betting on Troy to get invested in this card thing. And the party ancillarily knows coming into the adventure that they're looking for the MacGuffin or the person who knows the thing, right? But they don't know who their contact is here in the bar. All they know is there's this sort of like loquacious and enigmatic, well-dressed man with this just like, he just won't stop cleaning his nails, and he doesn't even look at anybody. And now it's time to like flip the cards, and oh, look, he's won again. He's got to be cheating, right? Like whatever it is. And I don't know. So I'd run these train heists, and so I 20 characters, and I had like at the center of the room, and I printed off extras, as in case people wanted to keep them as souvenirs, right? So I just had like the folder, the actual like Trapper Keeper, like folder that was stretched out a little bit, and that was where all the player characters were, just like in order, with little like little post-its for tabs, because like actual tabs are like super expensive, and then I had my like NPCs that populated the train, and then like my like A, B, C, D, if then bloody blah, like I was writing a pick your own adventure novel, like pretty linear like module, because I'd played modules, my friends had run modules, and so like I used to write my adventures like modules. I'd have this thing, and I would run this thing. I don't know. You had to get your free ticket, you had to do something like 12 hours of work, or 12 hours of GMing or whatever. I can't even. It was some arbitrary value that equated to a bunch, and I think it was like
a block with
it was
player count mattered, like if it was an 8-player thing.
Yeah, and I think I set mine to like 10 players, because I felt that was the upwards of what I could handle, and it was always like one person who had played Rifts before, a bunch of people who had never played Rifts, and like that's my party, and usually like 5 or 6 people, right? And they show up with their little like cut off pieces of paper, like I got Rifts, and they're in my game, and it's Rifts train heist, right? I think I referenced Clint Eastwood and Billy the Kid in the pitch for it, because I love westerns, and that module never got through my script, never ended the same way. I ran that same exact adventure for like 4 years because lazy. And they didn't reject me. And I'll run riffs. Like riffs train heist. And I learned a powerful lesson doing that. And I remember the one that stands out in my mind was the one where I had a bear boy, which is they're like, they're dog boys who are genetically like engineered like dog soldiers, right? Like, and one of the variants is you can be a bear boy instead, or like a tiger or whatever. And so there's like a bear boy, and I remember this is of all the times I ran this is the one that stands out in my mind. There was my whole punchline is like the train crashes and it's an elemental evil demon that's been in the train the whole time, and you're supposed to fight the demon at the end. And we got to the crash like twice, and like one of the times the big bad evil guy ended up being like the other heisters that weren't used, because you could be the bandits that were planted on the train to like take over the train, and they ended up the bigger bad evil guys than the elemental through some random crap that had happened. And but like the best one was like somebody got killed. Like just roll of the dice. Maybe I described a scene too much, like, and like random act of violence happened. Maybe I was bored and like somebody was dead in a train car suddenly, or whatever it was. Or it was a detail in my script that I'd forgot to read a couple times before, as like I don't know what it was. And this freaking bear boy like became obsessed with like the high society car and insisted on getting the monocle and the top hat from one of these like random characters I had. So he had a monocle and a top hat and like was smoking a pipe and like became like Sherlock Bear. And like it became like a whole like Agatha Christie like whodunit murder mystery out of nowhere. You can, if you're willing to play with your players at the table, where they will take you is far better than any story you've ever written down. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some times where like you can yes and yourself into a corner or absurdity, and you lose the stakes and it's not fun for anyone anymore because they're just like doing everything they want and yada yada yada. So that can happen. And I don't have any advice for knowing where you're like going past the line. The most important part I think to remember is like stakes and conflict. As long as you always have stakes and conflict, you'll never yes and yourself into like the stratosphere where nothing means anything anymore.
I think what's relevant too is when you think about the sandbox that RPGs offer, you still understand that any sandbox like has to have the frame, right? Like there has to be something framing it back towards that middle ground of you can play in here. Like
right. There's got to be an outer bounds, like a third rail, right? Like there's got to be some limit. Yeah, go on.
And I think when you're structuring that game, especially at a con, like there's Troy, you and I have talked about running a con RPG versus like, a home game, because you don't know your audience, and I think that makes it incredibly more difficult. Like as a comfort level for a GM is like I know the players that I've played with now for 7-8 years in various campaigns. I know their play style, like I know the level of interaction they're going to want to give. We'll just keep rolling. And like I know Josh, for instance, when I'm playing with you, you don't always like to be real active. You're kind of like the voyeuristic player. You like to see what's happening around you and like, not always be jumping to the forefront of like the dialogue or the interaction. And Troy,
I'm not the spotlight guy for sure.
And like Troy, I know you like doing the fun stuff, but too, like you're also you like having your moments, but you don't like constantly being the one to drive like the dialogue, the narrative, the interaction, and others like are more drawn to combat. Like, I know Brendan enjoys like his figuring out what his character does and then like being successful in combat. And I lean on like Bryce or Tom for like the dialogue or like some of the RP heavy stuff. And, so like I've gotten used to that. And I think that makes GMing infinitely easier than like a cold open of a group of strangers. Because You have no idea what you're getting into.
Yeah, I think it's and we've talked about it before. I think it's a different challenge, right? You're gonna have, you set your expectations a little differently, right? And you probably structure the the adventure in a little different way because you have this wild card that you don't know who's gonna sit down at the table, right? And you need to figure out again, are they gonna click or how are they gonna? And I think there is that, I'll call it push pull, right? Like you sit down and there will be a group and all of a sudden you'll feel like, there's a couple people at the table that are, maybe they're a Josh, like they're gonna play with you and you're gonna say, all right, this person's taking the lead. I can kind of bounce off them and go, or you kind of get a group that's a little bit more passive, right? And you're like, oh no, I have to kind of be the one to kind of guide them through and get them. And maybe halfway through there'll be some trust established, right? Because some of that is that, right? And maybe they, halfway through the session, maybe, okay, yes, this person has found something they grabbed onto and went. But I think it is, a lot more difficult because you are feeling people out and you just kind of got to have a plan A, plan B, figuring out what's going to go.
It comes down to that reactive, GM style. Like somebody does something, you've got to be prepared, and it's easier to prepare when you have a known quantity of an established play group, and it's less. It's not as easy if you're going into an unknown, table. You don't know it's that whole like, play to your audience, right? Like comedians will
know your audience,
know what in their set is gonna get their fans to laugh, and they work towards it. But you go to like an open mic night, and it's a lot different, right? Because the material is untested, the audience is untested and unfamiliar. And that's kind of the equation there.
Right. Well, there's two things. Bill Burr's Philadelphia bit, and where he just simultaneously is getting everyone to boo and hate him so much. It's not a bit. He got heckled.
Yeah.
And just heckled the audience instead. And like the language is cringe, and there's like hasn't aged well, and even at the time it wasn't like, oh, this is pristine. But like as a performative piece, getting this whole city to simultaneously hate him and cry laugh at the same time. And you can hear them back and forth at that moment where you're like, this guy is a master of manipulating audiences. You don't get there without a lot of failure.
Yeah.
And even when you have, as a GM, I think GMs, like especially like new GMs, and this is a perspective that's like become so alien to me over so much time. I actually think I've become very like complacent in my GM style now, and like I need something to like shake it up for me and like to, reignite the fire. Not reignite the fire. Like unlike AOS hobby and models where like the fire wanes, the fire for me to GM and tell a story never wanes. That's maybe something we don't talk about the Forever GM, because I think there are different types of Forever GM. I am the type of Forever GM that like the fire to tell a story never goes out, because by trade and eventual hopeful career, I am a writer. I'm a storyteller. RantCast is about telling people's stories. Ancillarily, it's about getting my story out there too. Like, because I'm a selfish prick, like writers are. We're liars and we're pricks.
A selfish prick who gives tirelessly to efforts to help others and
but like again,
give a voice to the voiceless. And
I mean, all that's true too. But there's that again, the part that like I don't want to go into like the neuroticism of me, where like it's both true that I'm a selfish prick, but also I try to give as much possible. Like both are true statements, and I can't explain the nuance between the two. But with that, like I've been so disconnected from like the new GM, and like the times the times they are a changing, as Bob Dylan famously said. Like the times have changed from when I started GMing. Like there was no Roll20,
right?
Going to Gen Con to get my free ticket and running like kind of a throwaway concept of train heist, which has become so wrote and hack now to like suggest a train heist adventure now is just like, at the time I thought it was like, oh, it's genius, Western on the ley lines. You know, I just thought it was the most awesome thing ever. And like plot twist, demons what's powering the engine of the train. And you think you're there for like this box of like jewels, or actually, by the way, the box is pre-riffs videos, because pre-riffs artifacts is like a big deal, and the pre-riffs artifacts was a Clint Eastwood movie. That's what the artifact was. It was a Clint Eastwood reels. The 35mm reels is what was in the like magic treasure chest. It was, and the quest giver was a Chianku dragon, which is like a shapeshifting dragon. And like his name was Ullman, or Old Man, just pronounced weirdly. Ullman, so Mr. Ullman, wanted you to get this like MacGuffin for him and heist the train to do it, and then like your reward at the end if you completed it was you would get to watch this pre-riffs artifact with him, and you'd watch a Clint Eastwood movie at the end. Yeah, 14-year-old Andrew, you're welcome, everybody. Yep,
Well done.
bow. I think like 4 years of running it, like three parties actually got to like the actually watching the film, like.
And then it was the outlaw Josie Wales, and they were disappointed it wasn't High Plains Drifter, and they were like,
it was High Plains Drifter. It's the one where he's literally a ghost. He shows up at the beginning. He's like, it's like heavily implied he's a flippin' ghost. Like the Roll20 era and the like finding a Discord group to play with, and like there's so many communities, and like I've seen the Reddit horror stories, you know, of jamming horror stories, and I'm like, wow. But also I have some of those, but also, wow, some of those. You know, like, but for us, it was a Gen Con thing, or I guess the closest, and maybe you didn't go to Gen Con or a Gamehole Con or whatever the convention of your region was or whatever. I just said Gamehole Con just to plug it, not because... You know,
it's a great convention and a
pro-
great town.
not chronologically relevant necessarily. Or like I guess at closest you'd have like a board in your game store that would say like GM looking for players looking for GM, right? Like you'd see some stuff like that. A little bit later on, I remember Milwaukee Meetup or blank Meetup, and then that was like a website for your region, and you could like look for groups. But we did it. We went in untested with it like the con crowd, and so you over prepared to have most of what you prepared not matter, and or at least that was, unless you were really rigid to the structure, like it really was a pick your own adventure book, and you could not progress from the scene unless they did the exact same thing, which just dislodged a memory modules I wrote, because I did write stuff like that where I would have dialogue written out like in quotation marks and everything that they wouldn't say unless you asked them about that
Specific question.
Yeah. So like in my earlier modules that I wrote, I did do that. But by the time I hit Gen Con,
you were writing video game like dialogue trees for your
yeah. Like I
RPGs.
said, young Meph was way more prepared than old Meph. Old Meph is like I'll have a speech about death. Like he's just, but it's sad speech. And like it's just that's yeah. And I'll write like a couple sentences of like that I want him to definitely say in the scene, but I don't know. Young Meph like over prepared like a mofo, but then like. You do that thing where you're running your middle school and your high school groups, and they never did the stuff to unlock the chains of dialogue that you had prepared. And then like I had that vendetta where I'm like, you're gonna hear this chain of dialogue somehow, and then like just shoehorning it in, and it wasn't natural. And going through that failure of that, and I don't know how to give players advice that are new to GMing to like how to help them fail through that faster. I guess you can benefit from me telling you don't worry about it, maybe, but to be able to like do the improvisational, the sort of like reacting to your party style of GMing, you just kind of got to fail a lot.
Yeah,
but
it's experiential.
Yeah, but like the thing is like I'm a forever GM now of 30 years because the majority of my life, because I wanted to do it early, and I just like kept doing it. And I always had like a good idea, and then I just like kept running with a good idea. And I always ran with like people who wanted to play the games, because nobody wants to be the forever GM except for like two crazy ass people in the entire like podcasting sphere right now that we know of, and
At least two. Yep.
at least two, right? And I don't know. So like I think the worthiest part is I guess kind of wanting to do it, right? Like
Yeah.
is-
You either have to want to do it or you have to, if you want to play. I really think there are those folks that just want to play RPGs, and the only way they're going to be able to do it is because they say, "Hey, listen, I've read this book. Let's make characters and let's play this
Yeah.
game."
I
Right?
mean that's
Like
yeah.
that's
No.
how you kind of fall into it, is because you're the one who bought the book, and you are the one that really really wants to play, and like 12-year-old Ty, I knew I wasn't going to play unless I got my dad and my 8-year-old brother
Are
to
we
play. Like,
are
at
we
that
the
point in
two
time.
different types of forever GM? Are we the two different types? Like the one who like wanted to play and so he had to run it to know that he was the only one who was going to play, and then I was the one who like always wanted to run it but was worried about not knowing how until Sam showed me the way, and then I like became over prepared guy. But since my pitfall is that like in the groups everyone knew that I was the GM, so like they're just like, oh yeah, Andrew will run it, and then they're just
I-
like they'd
Yeah.
buy me systems and give them to me to run.
Oh, see, like I feel like, and Josh and Troy might correct me here. Maybe I'm totally off base. I feel like our group wouldn't have played D&D if I hadn't been like, "Hey guys, I'm going to run this," or "I'm going to run this campaign," or "I got an idea for this campaign." I feel like we never would have gotten back in the D&D. So like, I DM'd in grade school for my family. Then in high school, like middle school, I had a buddy that ran a game. He passed away when we were in our early 20s, like 2021. And then after that point, since my friend Dave was no longer, alive, like I was like, well, if I'm going to play RPGs, I've got to kind of do it. Like me and him would trade off a little bit, help each other out, but then it was like the only other person I knew that ran games was gone. So it was like, as I moved into my 20s and like, developed that. Now, recently I met my dear friend Paul a few years ago, Paul DK, who is also a forever GM. So I've gotten a chance to play in like his mage game, and, like he plays.
I'm
my
envious
D&D
of that
games.
mage game, by the way. I'm envious. I've heard about this game.
Yeah, it's an experience. But I saw you had a statement or a question.
Well, yeah, like so like Troy mentioned like meeting you, the other forever GM, who was more the forever GM than he was. When you met Troy, why didn't you like shoehorn him into becoming the forever GM of the group because he had been it before? Like what? How did that dynamic play out? To where, like you maintained the forever GM torch, I guess.
Yeah, we sat down with our RPG book collections, and we did a feat of strength. We just saw who could carry the biggest stack
that makes
of
sense.
source books.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then that person got it. No, I don't even know. Like, I think it was because I found out Troy had played D&D. I know Josh and I had played a few others. I'm like, I want to play D&D. The only way I think this is going to actually happen is if I just start running a campaign.
Yep, and you created enough momentum, and then and you also have this drive, like so there's something.
There's a fire there.
Yeah, I don't know what. There's something that fuels Ty, because I mean, in whatever it's been, I don't want to know like how long we've been. Like you've been running nonstop, D&D campaigns for us for, I don't know, it's probably 6+ years, right? 6-7 years.
See,
Yeah.
I don't think you're the reluctant GM, even though you described some qualities of a reluctant GM, like the if I don't run it, nobody will.
Well, now I
Thanos,
enjoy it.
I'll do it myself, and you grab the like Infinity Gauntlet, right? Like,
Yeah, and then I snap and
yeah.
but no, now I enjoy it. But you said fire, which brings me to a good point. I think we're on a RantCast worthy episode of Playin and Slayin. This is our longest episode.
We're in a danger of putting a 7-hour
record.
one up here, so
My bad.
might have to.
No, not your bad. I thank you. This is what I wanted. But you mentioned fire, and I alluded to, I think before we started recording, I thought of the Quickfire challenge for the Rant Master himself. I'm going to force you to answer questions.
You can't go into the quickfire section without answering the second half of your own question to begin with.
Yes.
What
And I-
happens when forever GMs become players?
It goes off so in that mage game, I have a character named Blair Larson. Blair is my mage, and he is not a psychopath, but definitely a sociopath.
Mhm.
Like, and it has become a term in other games, not just my game, just blaring it. So I get to this point where my character decides the only way forward is to go 100% into this wall as fast as he can. And this wall could be a bad guy, this wall could be whatever it is. Like, it is caution to the wind. He's a man of action. And I think what it brings out in me is I push limits as a player because I have been pushed in some ways for so long that it's like
It's
I've
like
got
trauma.
this. Yeah, it's me working through my GM trauma.
Yeah.
That's what it is, by inflicting trauma on my
Yeah,
my
the
GM.
next GM. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that happens.
But I just go 110%, like
I,
caution
I,
to the wind, sacrifice everything. I'm burning the world down, and I'm taking this bad guy with me, or this problem with me.
do you remember Knights of the Dinner Table? Does anyone here remember Knights of the
Yes,
Dinner Table?
yes.
Yeah, so the DABA is their GM or whatever, but he's the new GM, and I think it's Brian is their old GM,
Yeah.
and he's the token like rules lawyer character. And I always think of forever GMs as like Brian when they become players again. Is they're just the player that is the most difficult to GM because they know the rules as well as you, or sometimes better.
Better. Yeah.
And they have this vendetta, this like chip on their shoulder. It's not even to like beat the game or to like
No.
upstage the current GM because like that's not where they're at in their mindset. And this is kind of where I was hoping this would go. They're not thinking on it in terms of like breaking the rules or bending the rules or ruining the game. They've just been in this freaking box for so long, traumatized, and they're like, I'm not in the box anymore. I'm free, and they just like, and all of the things, it just evil. Like it's
Kinda,
just,
I feel
it's
like
kind of like a dad's night out, right? Like when you have a young child and you're in all the time, you don't go out. When you go out, you go hard. Like, you're like, I'm gonna drink 12 Jaeger bombs because, see, there's my Jaeger bomb joke that I've been waiting for.
Jaeger bomb. Yeah, there you go.
Because I
You
can.
have to say it that way from my gaming group. That's how we say it in our tabletop community. Troy looked like he had.
Yeah.
no, I just want to. I don't get to see. I didn't see Ty playing his in the thing, but I see Paul DK play in our D&D game, and that's exactly what it like. Paul plays these. I'll call them complex, really kind of fun characters. But it feels like exactly what you're saying. Like Paul, we let Paul out, and he's found this really fun thing that I don't know, like that he wants to play with, and I just think he's had some really memorable characters in the campaigns and the D&D side, and it's that's what it reminds me of, which is really cool.
Yeah, you initially posed the question, so I'll like add my perspective here, and then we'll go into like the anti-rant round, which is I have when I'm GMing, I have like all these concepts like constantly, and many of them never see the light of day. And so what happens is like I'm running my games, and I'm like, oh man, this would be really cool to see. This would be really cool to see, but it doesn't serve the story right now, and it doesn't serve the world, or it doesn't serve the players, right? Like I'm like, man, I have this like really cool idea for this like awesome vengeance paladin, and then I'm like looking at the party, I'm like, the party doesn't need a vengeance paladin to like supplement their, like power level or whatever, and like there's a vengeance paladin doesn't serve the story because it's like this like big hopeful story about hope and shit. And I don't really see a vengeance paladin as a villain in this setting because and you just like. And I'm like, all right, so the vengeance paladin gets tabled, and then like, and I just end up with this just like draft table of all these ideas and these character concepts that never get used and never get used and never get used. And finally, some majestic angel comes along, and they're like, I have this idea to run this game, and I'm like, Oh, how quaint. Somebody else wants to run a game. You know,
Tell me
like
more.
tell me more. And then they'll like say something about their setting or their world, and I'll be like, I've got a concept for that. But I'll immediately destroy that concept that I had and all these like pent up ideas because I'll get fixated on something in the world they've pitched me or the setting they're about to run that I'm varying degrees of familiar with. And then I just have this concept that like eats me up for this character that I finally get to play. I'm like, oh, I have this idea. And like I write out as much backstory for that character and more than any single character in my entire campaign that I've been running for 4 fucking years, and I'm just like obsessed with it. I'm utterly obsessed with it. And I am going to tell this character's story in your world. And like it's a little bit of the Rorschach thing where like I'm not locked in here with you, you're locked in here with me. Like where finally I get to be my character for once that like I'm not an asshole because I think there's something where players out there who make player characters that are like, well, my character would do the douchebag thing right now to the whole party. I'm like, why are you making the character who do the douchebag thing to the whole party, you jerk? You know, like, why are you making that? Why is that your character concept? Like, I don't get those people who are like, well, my character's an asshole who'd steal from anybody. Like, awesome character, bro. Like, why are you doing that? No, but like, I had a character whose whole character concept was like in Vampire the Masquerade, Banu Hakim, who are just like, they are justice, they are the night. Like they're so fucking metal right now. V5 has done some great stuff for they've had some missteps, but like all the clans that were just horrible racist stereotypes before have been like way more fleshed out, given a lot more life, like just a lot more interesting. And Banu Hakim, formerly Asimite, are like one of the ones that like benefited the most. And was Carl, Jason Carl, whatever his name is, like has gone on record talking about how much he wanted to like really like breathe some life into them. One of their main writers. So I'm like reading it. I'm like, oh crap, they're basically Batman. And like, I'm like, what if Batman but anime? And like is genuinely like Sin City Marv, Mickey Rourke's character is Marv, right?
Marv, yeah.
And is like Marv, where just like he's just kind of a terrible person, but in a world that needs that type of terrible person, and he knows he's a bad guy, but he knows he's got to be the bad guy because there's way worse crap out there. And I'm like, this is the character I'm making. Here's the safety rails. Is like, I'm not going to PK. I'm not going to like go against the party because like he's got like some code of like whoever he thinks is in his charge is, you know, deserves the full like leniency, mercy, yada yada yada. So I gave him his own like path, which like allowed him to be not adversarial to the party. But then like I was in this game and I'm like, you have no idea the amount of like this character that is about to be inflicted on your world. And like that character was so potent he carried into like when that initial ST got fatigued and quit running, and then the next ST was like next man up and like started running the game because the forever GM thing is like they're out of whack. They haven't found their forever GM. And like the character was so potent, he made it into the next game, depowered a little bit and de-leveled, but like it was like the whole thing is he got a Wolverine arc where he literally had like a blood ritual that like bound him and like bound, not as in like bloodbind, but like bound his power and like gave him amnesia, and he just became Wolverine. Like he was literally just Wolverine. Like he just lost all of his memories and stuff, like adamantine bullet through the brain, whatever, doesn't matter. Like he was so potent in the previous game that the next game shaped around him too. And I'm like, here's the thing. You don't have to run a campaign that deals with any of my backstory elements. I'm just gonna find the story and play my character in your world. And you're just gonna have to deal with that or not invite me into your game. Yep. Because I've been pent up for so long I have to let it out.
We just want to play. you guys. That's all it is. We just want to play.
Forever GMs just want to play. This is where like this is my like plea to your GMing group, because I know you've got like a few GMs amongst you. If you run Pathfinder, I am going to play a Magus, because it is the best Gish class ever created by Wizards of the Coast and or Paizo. They have never made a Gish melee mancer better. Paladin and 5th Ed comes close. Don't get me wrong. They hold the shoulder buttons to slap shit. It's pretty great. Like Vengeance Paladin, just like you hold all the shoulder buttons, all the smites, cast all the all the spells going into it.
Explode, yeah.
Awesome. Especially if that shit's a fiend.
Oh, yeah.
But Magus in first edition Pathfinder is the perfect Gish class, and I tell every GM that ever wants to run. I haven't found them yet. Maybe I will. I don't know. They're going to run a Pathfinder game, and I just go up to them and I'm like, I'm going to kill anything you throw at me once.
Everything.
I'm like, no, not everything. One thing once. I'm like, the character I'm about to make is going to kill it, because I'm making an anime character that has the God Blade and will hold all the shoulder buttons and kill the one thing once, okay? This is the Spirit Bomb. I have the Spirit Bomb. So, here's how you deal with me. Let me do that sometimes. But then just have 2 of the thing. I'm like, because I'll feel great that I killed the most powerful dragon you've ever made, thinking it was the most powerful dragon the party's ever encountered, and then I literally kill it, and you're just like, okay, and then you're just like, its mate shows up, and I'm like, all right, guys, I'm done for the day, and I walk away, and I'm like, I've told every GM ST, I'm like, you have no idea how much I want to play this one character concept, this Aijitsu master who just kills the one thing once. And I'm like, I'll do some other stuff, because I swat stuff with a sword regularly, kind of okay. But once a day, with all of my resources aligned, I will literally, but if it's lightning immune, I'm like, if you're thinking of the level of lightning immune, you're not even thinking on the level of broken I've made this character.
We just want to play.
I just want to play. I just want to see it, because it's no fun if I do it to my players.
Right.
Because I have infinite time and infinite resources, and I've killed one player character once.
We've talked about the concept of we need a
energy.
GM. We need a GM, a party of all GMs, right? And a rotational forever GM party where
that's what the Rifts game was for that precious 2 months or whatever it was, or 3 months. It was just
All right, we're gonna bring this home, and we're gonna bring this home. So I explained, I don't know if we were recording, there's a lot of Top Chef that gets watched in my house, and the Quickfire, I think they call them Quickfire challenges, where they have to they adjust what they're used to, and they have to do something, to a little bit off the cuff, a little bit spontaneous. So what I thought of is that since, you have a 7-hour episode of your own, and now a 4-hour Playin and Slayin episode, I thought I would not allow you elaboration. So I'm going to ask a series of questions, and you're going to give a short answer. And at any point, if it's more than a short answer, it's going to get, flag on the play waved off, and we're going to go to the next question.
All right.
Are you ready?
Can I know how many questions there are so I can time my flag?
There are 6 questions.
All right. I'm ready.
All right. First one. When you are playing a game, would you rather win just barely or win completely with no chance for your opponent?
What type of game?
Let's do this in a series. AOS.
Close game.
A 1-to-1 board game like a Twilight Struggle.
I want to destroy you.
A cooperative game like Pandemic.
I want to destroy the pandemic with my friends.
Magic the Gathering.
Oh, I want to destroy you and take away your fun. I want to destroy you so thoroughly you didn't have fun playing that game against me.
All right. Next question.
like a land card guy.
Icarid.
Are you familiar with the this is relatively inappropriate game, but it is often referred to as FMK, fuck, marry, kill,
Okay, yeah, I'm familiar with it.
where I give you three names and you choose one that you would marry, one that you would kill, and one that you would
Have sexual
have relations with.
Yeah.
Okay.
Already anathema to my personality, but continue.
Catacross, Arkin, Neferata.
I mean, I'd marry Catacross. That's easy. I mean, I'd fuck Neferata and kill Arkan.
Love it. All right. You have to choose one of these roles for the rest of your gaming life. Anytime you play an RPG or an MMO of any kind. Tank, healer, support, or DPS.
MMO or RPG, like tabletop.
Yeah, so like you have to play World of Warcraft. Tank, healer, support, DPS, but also that role is what you have to play when you sit down to play like D&D, Pathfinder.
Tank.
All right.
Easily tank.
Favorite RPG to GM. Pick one.
I don't like you. Curveball. It's my 5e one shots. Not 5e. When I take the 5e rules and bend them to my will to run one shots for a bunch of people.
Favorite RPG to play as a player, not a GM.
I mean, it's Rifts. It's Rifts. It's quirky and it's bad, but it's Rifts.
And my final question for you. One of these metas will live forever in Age of Sigmar. The other two will die. The UK meta, the Australian meta, or the US, specifically in parentheses, Midwest meta.
Sorry, world. USA.
And that was your quickfire challenge. I may have given you a few too many words in one spot, but wanted to try to turn up the heat a little bit with some tougher questions. So hopefully, mission accomplished.
Yeah.
And I think this is the point in the show where I then segue and I say thank you, Andrew, for being with us tonight. This was a lot of fun, and I think we went down a lot of the rabbit holes that we've wanted to go down at other times. Definitely, we'll need to consider a part 2 or parts 2 and 3.
I promise I can be a good guest and stay on topic sometimes. I really can.
You were a great guest. So we had story time with Steve Herner one time, which like Steve, we just asked questions and it was totally free form. There was no structure. So I think we've had more structure with you than when it was story time with Steve. But thank you so much for being on. Real quick, I'm going to skim through kind of a couple of events. So Holy Havoc, speaking of Steve Herner, he's running that here in the month of November. He's got some open spots. If you didn't know, a few worthless hobbyists dropped from that tournament, opening up a few. So hit him up at Holy Hammer Hearn on Twitter. Find Havoc, go attend, bring your painted toys and have a blast in some truly zany Age-O Sigmar. Age-O Sigmar. Whew. Then we just got done with Gamehole Con. I know RockCon, Dragonfall. There's a lot that just happened, and it's kind of this lull into the winter. There's Midwinter Gaming Convention downtown Milwaukee in January, and then Adepticon's right around the corner in the spring. I'm sure Troy and Josh will be there at Adepticon. But I will.
Any word on Ragnarok? What's the word on Ragnarok?
So yeah, More to come. I think Bryce has an update or a plan that he's planning on sharing here in the coming days. But I don't have any official information to share.
Fair enough.
But as always, we're in a number of places. Twitter at Playin and Slayin Show, basementofdeath.com. All of our emails if you ever want to get bored and shoot us some emails during the day. But Andrew, I want to give you a chance, man. Where can people find you, hit you up? I think we've shared your Twitter hashtag, but if you just want to run through the show and the tweets and...
Yeah, the internet gag is sharing your Twitter because you say something like ostentatious or whatever. But on Twitter is actually it's the most active way to get a hold of me. If you want to dispute how awesome of a GM I am, you'll lose. But it's at @MR_MEPH. So at Mr Meph on Twitter. That usually has a door into all of my insanity. So, but it's also where my DMs are open if you want to talk mental health. I can't give you advice. I can't tell you anything. But I'm always open to listen and redirect you to people who are professional or some resources that I've come in contact with. And I always have like a personal anecdote that, is whatever. So yeah, Mr. Meph on Twitter. Otherwise, you can watch me live on RantCast on Twitch at Twitch TV /MR_Mephisto, Mr. Mephisto. And I'm on the YouTubes, just like this YouTube right here that you should be liking and subscribing for Basement of Death. Feed the algorithm. Make sure that Basement of Death and the Playin and Slayin podcast is favored by the robot gods when they take over.
Yes.
By feeding them your interactions here on YouTube. But I too am on YouTube. You can probably just look for like Rantcast or Mr. Mephisto. It has its own like web address. It's like youtube.com/c/insomnia or Winsomniacast, which is my old website. Winsomnia,
Love it.
Yeah, so it's got its own URL, but it's like an ancient one. So probably just like look for me on YouTube, I guess. But whatever. And then yeah, just like Playin and Slayin if you don't already. I know you've made it all the way to the end where we're like plugging stuff, but like you really should talk about how good this show is because it's the best like total gaming show you're going to encounter, and it's coming from a place that, quite frankly, is the birthplace of all your great games. It's Wisconsin. Suck it, the entire world. We're better than you when it comes to gaming. So, like the show that's the most about gaming from the place that is the most about gaming, which is Playin and Slayin.
Bam.
Thank you very much, sir. And Josh and Troy, thanks for coming along for the ride tonight. And I mean, I'm without words. Josh, any final thoughts? We'll leave the final thought to Coop with 33.
The pleasure's all on this side of the table, let me tell you.
Oh, I bet it is. Keep the dice rolling, the drinks on ice, and no matter what, keep playing and slaying. We'll do the pretend count me in thing where Troy does like 15, 12, 3, and then I say 2 and 1 anyways, and just start to make it really easy for when he edits.
Yep. All right. 10, 8, 6, 5, 4.
What happened to the 2 or the 1?
Are we doing a Wayne's World bit right now?
Yes. We do it almost every episode.
Yeah, like you're not.
What happened to 2 or 1?
You don't say 2 and 1.
You don't say 2 or 1.
You don't say 2 or 1. Why don't you say 2 or 1?
Guys,
I can
still you don't know how many times
I can still see your heads moving. Like, stop coming along with me. Like, and they're just bobbing the head.
You don't know how many times I've cut out the "Where's the 2 or 1" from Make a Show.
Well, it's a rite of passage now. I'm glad I was here for it.
Me too.
We're only 56 episodes in, so I'd wager you've had to do it about 56 times.